What's really good, everybody? This is Nathan Allenbach, and welcome to the podcast where we get into people's stories and go down a bunch of rabbit holes about what's really good in the world. I've got no pressing announcements today, so we can get right into this thing. For this episode, I sat down with my friend Jason Ager. Jason is a professor and songwriter who has a PhD in German literature, which I learned in preparing for this thing. We met a while ago, I want to say close to 10 years ago, actually, at this open mic that I used to host at this place called Melody's Cafe right outside Philadelphia. And yeah, he played there, and he always seemed like a real genuine guy to me. He's a killer songwriter and super funny on stage, which always leaves like a lasting impression as an audience member. You know, like when someone actually is funny and entertaining or has some unique trait on stage. So anyway, we stayed in touch and finally got to sit down and talk. Throughout the conversation here, we actually talked a lot about his educational career and spent time just getting into the education system as a whole, focusing a lot on higher education and like the growing problems and that whole field, you know, around like student loan debt and the lack of teaching benefits. You know, Jason's a adjunct professor, which is super common now, and it's a ongoing problem where like colleges and universities just don't really want to fully commit to professors, and they end up like teaching part-time at a bunch of different places looking for work. So yeah, we got into all that and just like how technology is creating competition in the whole educational sector, and how there's just all these growing problems and complexities that I'm interested in a ton, and I don't know a ton about it, so it was great, you know, sitting down with someone who's on the inside of this whole situation. We also, outside of that, we talked about obviously his songwriting, which is how we know each other, just how he got into writing and how his, I'd say his artistry weaves into his teaching, you know, like for Jason, like, you can tell, like, talking to him, he's a very high-functioning, holistic type person. Like, all his work kind of works together in these interesting ways. So that was super cool to talk to him about. He's like one of the few local musicians I know, actually, who does music at least in part for a living, which is super rare and awesome to be able to do. And obviously, I think he's a super intelligent and easy guy to talk to. So anyway, I hope you all enjoy the chat. I'll have links to his music and his work in the show notes if any of you want to check it out. It's totally worth it. And as a local artist myself, I know it means a lot. So just do it, all right? Anyway, I think that's everything. As always, please hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, wherever with any show feedback. And please leave a review on the iTunes thingy. All right, now let's get into what's really good. Jason Ager, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here, man. You have no idea. I think I reached out to you like almost since when you started out with it, right?
Yeah,
and
it's been a while.
I'd love to come on, you know what I mean? And I'm glad it's finally going to happen.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
It's happening.
I know you're a great guy. Every time we interact, I'm stoked to talk to you. Man. And I'm going to let you on a quick, dirty little secret of the podcast. This is the worst thing ever, and I've never talked about it, I don't think. But I mean, it is so obnoxious how many people I want to talk to on this thing.
No, I get that.
You know what I mean? Like, I have a list. It's like a queue of all the people that have either reached out to me or I reached out to them, and it's like it's not even like a pecking order, because like a lot of it comes down to availability and diversity, because like, you know me, like we know a lot of songwriters, so I'm like, how many, like I'm like, okay, if I'm doing a songwriter interview this week, I should probably not do one for a couple weeks here.
You don't want to go over top with it, you know what I mean? Which is, you know, that's why I'm so glad that it worked out, man. I'm very excited to be here in the awesome little studio you got going on.
We call it the Minecraft studio.
Yo, it's so cool. If you haven't been, you know, on the podcast yet, when you come on the podcast, it looks like the place is like Minecraft. It's got these like chartreuse green, baffling tiles mixed in with these black ones, and it's got this like green and black theme. I feel like I'm a creeper from Minecraft. It's
Minecraft
really cool.
in real life.
Yeah, my son would love it. I'm telling you, he would like never ever leave this room. He'd be down here making weird like podcast videos.
Right. This building used to be a prison, so wow. It's like it's funny how like we're probably in like this like I don't even know, maybe it was like the warden's office or something like that.
Yeah, it's a true penitentiary where you do your penitence, that kind of thing.
So weird, man.
Only the penitent man will pass.
So, dude, I mean, let's like for people. I mean, I shouldn't even say for people who don't know. It's so funny when I do these episodes sometimes because sometimes it's like I'm doing an episode with a friend of mine, and sometimes it's with someone who I'm friends. I would consider myself friends with, like you, but we don't really know each other that well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, it's just as interesting for me to get to know the guests as it is, I'm sure, for the people listening. Yeah. So, I mean, where did you grow up, or what's your deal?
So, I grew up right on the border of like Northeast Philly and Huntington Valley, kind of like in between those two areas. I mean, I guess I was like in Lower Moreland or Bernathen, Beth Ayres. Mm-hmm. It's so funny, man. In that area of the world, like all these little towns come together right on the border of like Northeast Philly.
Yeah.
But that's where I grew up, and so my sister lives up here in Souderton. So my family's she's from this. They're from this area. My dad grew up in North Wales.
Okay.
West Point, Worcester, like all the stuff in the area. And so like I'm very much like a Montgomery County guy, but I spent a lot of my time in the city. I went to school in the city, so it was kind of as a kid I got to know the city a lot. And then I haven't lived in this area for the past 15 years. I lived in Europe for a while in Vienna.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Austria for about a year and a half. And then I lived in Washington, D.C. for a few years. And then in Baltimore for a few years. And then now for the longest time since like I was growing up, man, I'm like, I've been in one single spot, and that's in Glassboro or Pittman, New Jersey.
Right. So was the moving around, was it largely due to work, or was it just kind of like self-exploratory type stuff?
No, it was all, it was academic based, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I went to Vienna on a Fulbright fellowship after my baccalaureate studies, I guess you'd call it. I won a Fulbright, got a chance to study abroad. It was fantastic. Thank you very much, American taxpayers.
That's tremendous.
Because you paid for it. So that was really cool. I got to teach, some English and study at the University of Vienna. A lot of fun. There about a year and a half or so. And then I came back, did a little manual labor for a while I kind of figured out what I was going to do with my life a little bit. And then so I was applying to grad schools because, when you graduate and go get a Fulbright, you pigeonhole yourself a little bit, at least in certain regard, where it's almost expected that they, that you kind of going to continue on your studies.
Right.
I would bet that the rate or like the percentage of folks who do Fulbrights, they probably, it's like, in the 85-95% range where they're going on to some type of grad school or law school or something like
PhD,
that. Yeah, so that's what I did. I came back and spent a few years down in D.C. Working on a PhD at Georgetown. And then that brought me to Baltimore. And I was commuting down to D.C. every couple days. I was teaching a couple days. And then from there to South Jersey, my wife's family kind of is from that area, so we kind of moved down there to kind of follow her career. So, I'm more flexible in what,
Right.
I do the gig economy.
Right. Was the goal always to teach, or was there something else that you were kind of after?
Yeah, ever since I was younger, I kind of always liked... I like to give and take, in the classroom, and I guarantee it's from the experience that I had in the classroom, like
when you were a student, you mean?
Exactly, yeah. Like the kind of teachers that I fell in love. There was this guy Fran Johnson, right, in high school. He was the coolest guy. He's a local guy from the area. He was actually a member of Blackthorn, like one of the original members of Blackthorn, the Irish band.
Yeah,
fantastic guitar player, and I thought it was the coolest thing because he would bring his guitar into class, and he taught like history He taught Bible, but it was very, very specific. He was such he knew ancient Greek and Latin and stuff.
Yeah.
But he taught English. That was his main thing. So he'd talk about literature and then be able to tie it into the scriptural stuff.
Theology.
So I went to a Catholic high school, so it was very much like tied in, and I thought he was the coolest dude ever.
Mm-hmm.
So then he played Jim Croce songs, and like while he's waiting for the next class to come in, like just the coolest guy. You know, I still play some songs, like, you know, cover songs that I really like that I learned from him, man.
Wow.
Like, so that was the kind of thing. I thought, like, when I went to college, you know, I studied for a while and studied German and English, and I was like, man, I would love to be in the classroom. Like, I feel like that's such a, you know, a vital thing. I know our society doesn't tend to value educators in the way that they theoretically or hopefully should. Mm-hmm. And maybe they will someday.
Yeah.
But for me, it always felt really like, it felt rewarding when you walk out of a classroom and you feel like you've learned something that day that you didn't know before, or that you've been kind of acknowledged. You know, like your intellect's been engaged and you've been acknowledged as an individual, even if you're part of a collective, as a group and as a class. So I just love that whole give and take. I really did. And that led me on to do, you know, to study language, really, and literature. Those are like the thing. You know, I love these things. I mean, they're connected with music, you know.
Yeah,
I love music. And
I was going to ask, like, if there was like a
yeah.
specific. Were those things always interconnected, or did music come first, or did you have like a love for literature early on?
No, I mean, I guess it was probably music first. You know, like when I was younger, I just always loved music. You know. But I mean, if anyone, you know, knows my songs, or hopefully you'll get to know my songs after chatting with me today. Not you, I mean the folks listening. I know you know my songs pretty well. But you know, I write songs that could be sometimes perceived as, you know, as literary, mm-hmm. if you will. You know, I had a person introduce me at like a So Far show recently, which is kind of what brought this whole interview along.
Yes,
full circle. You know, you were interviewing Carolyn Lederach, who's like the person who runs the So Far in Philly, and I was like, oh God, I'd love to come on to that. Anyway, but so this guy introduced me. He's like, you know, every song is a thesis, and I'm like, that is a brilliant concept, right?
Quote that. Put that in my book.
I said to the guy, I was like, I'm stealing that, man. He's like, it's all yours, man. You're the one who gave me the idea. I was like, this is why I love and in that regard, like. And I don't like that concept of like the sage on the stage kind of thing. Like in the classroom, I find it to be a little bit presumptuous, or it's just a little bit pedantic,
pretentious, maybe.
Yeah, pretentious. I don't like that concept. But there is a performative element,
of course,
to the classroom. Like, you know, the way your banter, you know, works with your students.
There's definitely something to be said about your enthusiasm and your level to draw people in. Because I mean, you are, although obviously not to say that. Not to say what you're doing is literally storytelling, because you're educating people on specific topics, but like you are a storyteller in the sense that you're trying to bring these topics to life in a way that's going to engage young people.
You're constructing the narrative.
Yes, exactly.
In which that person gains knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if it's something as simple as like putting together a syllabus or something, like, oh, we're going to read this thing first, then that thing, because it builds upon one another. You know, it's the same thing as working a crowd when you're playing a show, you know. And maybe it's that element that I like, that give and take with the crowd. You know, like that engagement with the group, you know, and being able to tell weird, you know, humorous jokes that, you know, that I find hilarious.
Dad jokes?
Yeah, you know.
And the kids love dad jokes.
And there's something, exactly, right? There's something perennial about like that performance, right? Where you can kind of like tell the same joke to different audiences.
Yeah.
I tell the same jokes every year in my classes, you know what I mean? Like, because it's a different group of students, you know, there's something perennial, you know, about that. And I like that. And I think I always did. So when I was in college, like the job that I always wanted to do, like after I, you know, left the university I was studying at, was like, I would love to come back here and teach, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really like that specific place, because I'm actually back there teaching in that place, and I'm not that in love with it. But but the point was like, it was that spark that I discovered, you know, like the ability to really latch on to like passion and be able to express that passion even as a student, you know, to the professor or vice versa, or, you know, in written format on a paper, like that kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, like I don't love writing papers, you know, I don't sit around, like, you know, like, and I struggle, you know, trying to publish now, and that's a tricky thing. But
do you publish academic papers?
I do a little bit, you know.
Oh wow, not like specifically on language or English?
So it's, you know, mostly German language literature, you know, that I've published on. You know, I published a book.
That's what you got your PhD in, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
yeah. Right. So I've published a few things now. I'm working on some further publications, you know, partly derived from what I did for my dissertation. But yeah, so I published a little bit, you know, on top of the music stuff, you know, which, you know, that's its own different type of publishing. But yeah, it's crazy, you know, that the whole, like, I don't love sitting down and typing and writing, but that kernel of where that ultimate argument will come from, that stuff I love, man. It's like that seed, that moment where you like, it's that eureka moment. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, wow, that could be connected to so many things, or this particular element runs through this story, which also runs through this author's, things. Oh, it's beautiful interconnection, intertextuality, like, and that's the thing I love in music too, right? We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Isn't that what Bakhtin said, right? So, all music is the same way, it's all derivative in some regard. Hopefully it's not like in a negative.
Of course, it's been inspired by like decades and centuries of people.
And hopefully it's not too much cultural appropriation, but there is some of that.
Of course, it's inevitable to some degree. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I love that kind of intertextuality when you're using a specific phrase. Like, has somebody else use that? Did the author know that when they were using it? Even myself, when I write, there are phrases that I will use. And I'll think about it, like I've heard that in a song someplace, just a little snippet, or the way in which 2 or 3 words are together. Like, it's such a cool intertextuality, and to me, I see it, as paying honor and homage to the those who came before, and adding into that, that song, right, that universal song that we're all part of. So it's that spark, man. It's that moment that I chase. Yeah. It really is, and that happens in the classroom and on the stage. There are 2 times that it happens. And the funny thing is, man, and my world has become, I hate to say it like this, but like, as I've gotten a little older, I have kids now, like, there's that moment with them too, you know what I mean? Like, and a lot of my world revolves around them, obviously, as it should, right? But it's funny, I see that current and all those things, like there's that moment when my son or my daughter, they discover something, or they latch on to something, or I can teach them something that maybe I find to be profound, and they're just starting to begin to understand the very basic essence of it.
And the spark.
Exactly, man. Yeah. And that stuff fires me up. It really does. Not to be too, literal with that pun. But yes. It gets me excited.
That's perfect. How do you, this is just something that's always interesting to me, because as someone who, I consider myself pretty high functioning, like doing this show, the work that I do in social media, like marketing and like brand management and all that, it's very all over the place. Like, it is a 9-to-5 type gig, but it comes with me after work. You know what I mean? Like, I'm working nights, I'm coming up with ideas in the shower. Like, I might be doing something over the weekend. Like, it's all very scattered all over the place. Sure. And then on top of that, like, I do this type of work, and I do like the MC stuff for so far. And I'm kind of like,
and you're a killer singer songwriter in your own right.
Well, I've kind of stepped back a little bit recently from that again.
Man. You got to get back out there. I'm gonna drag you by your beard hairs.
I appreciate it. Maybe you will. Who knows? But yeah, like, just as someone like you know me, and I know you. Like, I'm pretty high functioning just in what I manage on, and it doesn't. As an adult, like, I feel like I'm at a place where I've reached a comfortable level of being able to do these things without feeling like I'm killing myself, Right. But obviously, just to other people, like, I've had people even reach out or Twitter or whatever and be like, "How do you do all this? Like, I'm in high school or I'm in college. Like, I can barely like concentrate on my work here. Like, how do you manage all this stuff?" So I mean, like, for you, like, how was this kind of like balance between teaching and music and family? Was this like a learned thing, or is this something that you've always been like high functioning and always busy?
I mean, I've always been a kind of busy guy. Like, when I was in high school, I used to crack myself up. I was like, I used to be in the concert band and the jazz band. I was on the honor roll.
So you were one of these guys, just like all-star, all over the place.
Yeah, I played on the varsity football team.
Wow.
And threw shot put, and was on all Catholic in band, and sometimes in the shot put. No, I wasn't the greatest football player. Sorry, Coach Klistra. Yeah, they used to love this one guy. We had this Coach Willis. I used to screw up my blocking assignment because I was on the offensive line. I was the littlest guy on the offensive line. I was 185 pounds soaking wet in high school. Now, I wish I was how heavy I am now. I'd probably done better. But I had this one coach, this offensive line coach. Every time I screwed up a block, he had this very subtle lisp in the way he spoke to, but he's a big, blonde-haired, muscly dude. And he would always go, "God damn it, Ager! God damn it, Ager! God damn it, Ager!" Like, all the time, whenever I would screw something up, man. And like, it happened way too often. And it almost got to be a point where I was like, I almost like laughed when I would hear him say it.
Yeah.
But at that age, you don't, you want to do well. You want to be part of that winning team.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, I always had that element, man. But it just, I guess, I think the only way I can survive is like that. I've had, and I can't announce the person's name, but I've had, because they're a friend, but the first time not first time, but after years, and they got their degree in psychology, and they were like, you realize you do have ADHD, and I was like, that explains a lot. You know what I mean? Like, because I've never been able to focus on. It takes me like 6 months.
You're all over the place
to write one song. You know what I mean? So like the fact that I put out albums whenever I do, it's sort of like a mini miracle because it took me 3 years to write all those songs on there. Yeah. Because I write a line here and then I'll put it down for 3 months because I'm not in that mode. But yeah, it's a great question, man. I don't know how certain people do it because I don't even think myself as like super, multitasking or high functioning, however you want to classify it. But I guess from the outside it might appear that way. But I think it's just the way my brain works, and I'm into every little thing, And I think it's one of those things. It's like when you learn to juggle. I can't juggle, but I think the way you learn it is by tossing like one ball up in the air,
start, you add one, and you add one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that happens in life, you know what I mean? Like, at least till you get to be a certain age. I mean, I imagine as you get to be a certain age, it starts going, the balls in the air, so to speak.
Of course.
They start to, drop off a little bit because you have less responsibilities, and you can only, do so much as you get older. But I think I'm still in that part of my life where I'm adding things in and at least trying to, juggle more and more stuff. But it's I don't really have any like strategies that make me do. I think it's just the way in which that some of us are wired. Sometimes I wish I could sit down and like, finish this publication I've been working on, or finish that song that I've been writing,
right?
Or like even just like, and my wife will attest to this, like finish a single task around the house. Like, I tore apart our bathroom like a couple of years ago, and she's like, "All right, this is your like challenge for 2014,
you've got to get this
right?
done.
You got to get this done in 2014," because she knows I work really slow, so I tore it apart, down to the studs, and I wrote a song about it too. But the whole process, and like I just, it got to the point this like winter where she was like just had enough. Like, that's it. We're calling up.
We're getting someone
we're
in
calling
here.
up our brother-in-law, who is like a killer contractor. He does stuff on the side as well as like he works for a construction company full time too. So he's like always building stuff and doing stuff, and like he banged it out in like a week. And
of course.
Oh man, but that's the problem, man. I would get into something and then it's a weird thing, man. I don't know. I don't know how people do it. Like yourself or people who are in a lot of different areas. I think to be honest, I think you fall into it. Like. I knew this guy one time. His name Brian Henderson. He's a Christian brother, and he said like we have these like ideas about our lives as straight lines, right? And like you have this path that you want to walk, but when you look back, it looks much more like a waltz than it does like a straight. I walked from
of course,
point A
never
to point
straight.
B.
Yeah,
you're waltzing around it. You're doing these different things and everything. I think that's just part of it, and.
Well, put it this way then, because we're talking about like busyness and like managing tasks and all that. But how about just pure energy output? Because I mean, like in terms of like being a professor, like you were saying earlier, it's very linked, or it's very comparable to being a songwriter in the sense where you're putting hours of time and energy into this craft or this product, and then you have to present it, and you're putting yourself out there. It's a high energy output, and then you have family. So then it's like you got kids, you got your wife. So like how do you do you ever feel burned out? Like how do you manage just the amount of like, because we all have a cap. We all have a cap of how much we have in a day. So I mean,
I try to find balance wherever I can, and maybe that's I one of the things, like I'm big. I love video games, and it's like
who doesn't these days?
It's great. Like I've always loved video games. I'm 5 years old. I remember getting. I'm older than you, but I remember getting at 5 years old when Nintendo first came out, dude. It was like I got the first Nintendo, and I was like, I remember like being so amazed by it, so enthralled with it. Anyways, that's one of my escapes. Yeah. So like I find time, where I can carve out some time, like and just escape into that world.
Right.
So I think that's for me. Like I need. That's a great question, man. I need downtime. I need probably substantial amounts of downtime that other people probably don't. Like my wife, she's very like focused and driven, very intelligent, a doctor in her own right as well. but she can like sit down and like accomplish a task, that's in front of her, in like a reasonable amount of time, and like with very minimal like, distractions and stuff.
Yeah.
But she doesn't require the same type of like downtime. Her work's different, and I think it's like, the kind of the way that certain people, like they have certain acumen, right? Or the certain parts of their personality that lead them and draw them to certain things. Like I'm not very handy. I can understand and follow you when you tell me that, oh, I did this piece of or this type of construction to build this type of thing. I can follow that.
Yeah.
Man, but for me to go ahead and do it, it's a whole different thing. I would never find myself doing that, or like even have the courage to do it.
Right.
So it's a funny thing. Maybe I'm not answering the question, but
you're great.
It's a bizarre kind of thing. We all kind of wind up finding things that suit us, probably because we're interested in that stuff. And the more you're interested in stuff, the more time you spend doing it, then you get better at it. And then someone from the outside is always like, how do you find time to do that stuff? And it's almost like, what do you mean? I feel just, like I'm just doing what I always do.
You've always acclimated to like where you are in that current time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe that's just that's a cop out answer. I don't know. But I mean, for me, that's kind of the always way it's been.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, like in terms of just myself, I would say also that like video games is one of those, like, it just helps me turn my brain off, like I go through spells of it. Like I remember last year I was coming out of just a chaotic time in like the social media world, and I was working like 70-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks, like on and off, not like every single week, but it was just like a compounding amount of time where like my sleep schedule was pretty screwed up, and I was bringing work home with me a lot, and I went through this like 2 or 3 month stretch where I bought a what do you call it, a subscription to Xbox Gold or whatever it is, like a live account, and just started playing Halo, which I hadn't played in like
long time.
Yeah, like 10 years or so, like longer than 10 years probably, and started playing this thing like just like to blow off steam for a couple days, and then it became like a literally almost like a meditation, like a necessary component to my daily rhythm, because it helped like literally reset my brain. Like I was at the point where I was just working so much. This was the only thing I could do where work was far away. Like, cause even like I'm sitting down watching TV, I could always check my phone. I could be on my laptop doing things while I watch TV. And like, I always have this temptation to like keep working when it's busy like that. So the video game just forced me to turn everything off. Like I shut the outside. It's like literally like a meditation, except instead of focusing on your breath or something, I'm like killing people in a game. but so I definitely think there's something to that. Like some
it's
people,
meditative,
and some people like your wife maybe like they're either more like it might be a demeanor thing. Like some people are more just level and like more balanced naturally with like their day-to-day like media consumption and their patterns of behavior. But someone like me, at least, like I'm so prone to burnout and to just like be like similar to you. I don't know if I'm ADHD, but like I am scatterbrained to a degree. Like you, I have like 1,000 projects going on at once, and I'm like, let me try this. Like I'll write this blog. Like I'll edit this podcast. I'll work on this project here, and it's just those little things to help turn me off definitely keep the rhythm alive.
and they let you they let you recompose yourself. They let you decompress. And let the creative juices flow out again. Once you get out of that. And I'll go in waves with it too. Sometimes I'll be playing a lot, and sometimes I won't. Depends on what time of year. What's going on. But it's always been something I really find. That is always like I said, decompresses me, allows me to escape a little bit, because I don't sleep exceptionally well. I mean, I sleep okay, but I don't think I need much time like sleeping as other people do. Like I can function on less sleep than certain people. Like I know some people that need to get their 8 hours. They don't get their 8 hours, man, they're just not happy. Like and I routinely function on like 5.
Well, that's amazing.
You know what I mean?
I know this guy. I used to be really, really good friends with this guy, Jason, growing up, and he's around your age, I think. And he has this like, I forget what it's called. It's like a specific disorder where he's part of like
restless leg syndrome.
No, yeah, right. He's part of like 0.001% of the world that has this, where his body only requires 2 hours of sleep a night.
Wow.
And it's like he's had it since he was a baby. Like it's bless his parents. Like,
Yeah, right. Oh,
he
my
used to
God.
tell me all these stories about it, and like he physically can't. Like he says he can nap during the day, but like on like a night's sleep or whatever, he like will just naturally, his body just wakes him up. Like he
Wow.
can't sleep more than that, or like on average more than that, I should say. And like just he would always tell stories growing up with like his brother, and how like the middle of the night, like he just read like every book, played every video game, and it was like almost like a curse because like he had all this time, but like everyone else would be asleep. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and his schedule was always crazy. But yeah, it's interesting. Like we all, it's total tangent, but yeah, we all have like a different propensity, I guess, for those energy outputs. You know?
But that's what makes things beautiful at the same time. It's like, we all want to be like, successful in all the same areas, right? But like, and maybe it's something that we have to come to the awareness of. And I certainly am still always coming to the awareness of this, because I'm never, 100% happy with where I'm at. Actually, I'm not very happy a lot of times with where I'm at. With success or creativity or whatever the thing might be. But maybe it's like a process. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, really, is, that it's kind of like an acceptance thing, right? That you can only accomplish so much. You can only be so, you have to kind of accept the things that you are good with, and the things that, also at the same time inspire you. You kind of have to find the things that turn you on, find the things that get you excited, which is one of the first things I always tell my students. I'm like, if you're here studying business, that's great. Do you really love business though? Like, if you love business, that's great. You should be studying that, But if you love, weird, digital art stuff, go make that digital art, man. You know, go, be in nursing if you like it. If that's your thing, if it fires you up, because that's gonna make you the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
If you have that passion, and maybe that's what I can go on. It is that I have a lot of passion. I feel like for different things.
Yeah. Well, jumping back to that idea of like you're existing in like a sort of glass half full or half empty state of not being fully happy and not being fully content.
Yeah.
Like, do you find that that's a element that drives you toward more success and more passion, or is it at the point where it kind of reaches a detriment and kind of takes away from your process?
It's tricky, when it comes to like that's a great question, man. When it comes to creativity, it definitely helps me. It drives me because I always want to create something new.
Yeah, you don't want to be content all the time.
Right.
You can't create when you're completely content.
And sometimes I'm like the most bummed out about where I feel like I am, or where I wish my songs were, or something like that, or like I don't have any new original ideas, think about in terms of like this, book I just read or whatever. It's those moments that I'll be driven to think of something that works, or like, that I'll push myself, I'll sit down, with the guitar and try to figure out a new thing that I want to try and play, or this, that, and the other. Those are like, in that area, the never satisfied kind of thing is very helpful. Which, I think that's help. Yeah, especially when you're struggling, you're trying to create something great. Those are the moments that creativity really comes alive. I'm of the opinion, though, that feeling of discontentedness or dissatisfaction or whatever the word is that we choose for it can be a real hindrance when it comes to like performance. You know what I mean? Like, and so like for me, the creativity abounds when I'm not feeling really particularly inspired by myself. You know what I mean? Like, the creativity goes up, but then I don't feel as driven to,
because
like,
you're not as empowered.
Yeah,
personally.
Exactly. Man, that's what it is. I don't always feel that they go like hand in hand. Like the more creative you are, the more success you're gonna have. It's a weird kind of thing.
Yeah,
like, it's like a supply and demand thing, right? Where you have all the creativity, but not seeing the success. But as your success rises, your attention is taken away from that. You're more complacent, and your drive to create gets lower. I mean, look at like every band has a great first album. Not every band, but a lot of bands have these great first albums, right? And then they get that sophomore slump, right? Because they have that success, And it's funny, you can look at bands that have like killer first albums, really poor second albums, killer third album, really poor fourth album. It kind of bounces back and forth. And I think it's like the natural circadian rhythm of creativity. And dissatisfaction therein, right? Because it's such a weird thing, and to the non-creatives in the world who don't have that creative aspect, I envy you. You know what I mean? Because there's so much I would rather be happy with. But then it's funny, people could look from the outside. It's a weird thing. When you're in the moment, it's always hard to see it. But that's my opinion. Yeah. So the dissatisfaction is very helpful for creativity, but it's not so helpful for empowerment, like you were saying. Exactly.
It's sort of like a dance. It's a similar dance to just like in general how artists are constantly going back and forth on their how they maneuver their ego. Because I mean, like, to be an artist on one level, like, you have to have a super strong ego to want to create and to want to put something into the world and and almost expect that people are going to accept it. You know what I mean? But then at the same time, like, you balance that ego with like your self-hatred. It's both sides of the same coin, because that where these songs or where this art or where this passion is coming from is typically a place of, despair or breakup or angst or whatever it might be. So it is it's a similar dance where I think some people, it could be easy for like say a person to create the product out of angst, but then when it comes to performing the product, then you're still caught in that angst and you can't really feel empowered. But then to others who master it, they can like summon the angst and then get on stage and be this all-encompassing presence or something.
And those people, they boggle my mind.
Yeah, they're the masters.
But maybe that's one of those things that for me and you right now, looking at that, maybe it's one of those situations where it's like, wow, how do they do that? But they might be there saying, well, it's that balls in the air thing.
That's so true.
Once you get habituated to anything, my dad says if you hang long enough, you get used to that too. Which is a very dark way to look at the world. But it's kind of true. Habituation plays such a huge role. Like how do you manage certain things? How do you survive certain aspects or parts of your life? Well, you do because you kind of get used to it.
Right.
And that's not to trivialize any type of trauma or horrible event in someone's life, but it seems sometimes that some people who shoulder some of the heaviest burdens, they start to, they habituate to it, and then once they lose that burden, obviously there's a lot of pain and suffering that's connected with it, and you never really lose that stuff, I don't think, but you survive it. You
learn how to process it in different ways and manage it and balance it.
Or at least I hope that one would survive, because obviously, we live in a very tenuous world.
It's true. It's always so interesting talking about these topics in the sense of suffering in that realm, because there's like rules and exceptions, and there's a spectrum of everything between, and it's like it is tough to. It's like you want to get on the stage, or you want someone to get on stage like a Tony Robbins or Gary Vee type motivational life coach figure, and be like, you can pull yourself out of anything, whatever. But we all know people who haven't. We know people who have committed suicide or fallen to suicide or have been struggling with lifelong mental illnesses and all that. So we know there's cases of people who aren't able to get out of that darkness, but we still cling to the narrative, the hopeful narrative that even those people, like you could be 45 or 65 and there's still a level of hope that you can pull yourself out of it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's there. I guess that really is up. That maybe that's the old eternal optimist in my self. And it's funny because I'm like the most pessimistic person you ever met. But deep down, like I believe that. I want to believe.
We're somewhere in this way. We're somewhere in this way.
I want to believe people are essentially good. I want to believe, that, Daenerys Targaryen didn't do what she just had to do. I hope it's not a spoiler at this point.
I love it. No, it won't be. Yeah.
Can't spoil it now. Right? It's all over. Right? But,
exactly.
But you know what I'm saying? I don't want to believe that in the heart of hearts. But like, even though like I'm the first one to be like, yeah, of course it happened, because I studied German literature. It can be very.
That's very.
It can be dark
very
at times.
Dark. Yeah.
So it's funny, people are dichotomies, man. The more people I get to know, man, the more people I realize, or the more I realize about people that, like the world wants to paint, and we want to paint things in black and white, man.
Yeah.
But it's such a gray thing, man. And that article you just published the other day, man, I sat there and read the entire thing.
Oh, the political identities article?
Yeah, and it told me it's going to take me 38 minutes to do it. And I'll tell you
It's
what,
a
Nathan,
commitment.
it damn near did. I sat there and read and read and read and read and read. I mean, you got really into it, man. But you're so right, because there are we want to believe that we're just right and left.
Yeah, right.
That we're just red and blue. That we're just black and white. You know what I mean? And that is the biggest myth, you know what I mean, of the entire universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, people are so complicated. I mean, that in writing that article, it was a culmination to me of just like compiling all these different ideologies. I was talking to this guy recently on another podcast about this, and just how I kind of approached the content itself, because I didn't approach it as like, oh, I'm just gonna like 1 month randomly start researching all these different like political subgroups or whatever. Like, I had come to a lot of those subgroups from over the past decade or so,
right,
on my own terms. So like, I had like this weird insider, in a way, perspective to some of it, where like I think it's easy the older we get and like the more like settled into wherever we land on the spectrum to kind of point to the other points of the spectrum and be like, oh, like they're that way, and then we kind of like mischaracterize, and like we don't really want to understand. I mean, like, and I think in large degree, like there can be good reasons for that. Like some of it might be like evolutionary, like some like self-preservation, like whatever it might be. But like for me personally, from like being inside some of these camps, it gave me like a few lenses to be like, okay, like this is where people who believe in this are coming from. This is where people who believe in this are coming from. Right. And I think the biggest takeaway there's a lot of takeaways, but one of the biggest ones for me was just that like there is a relative right and a left that we can categorize, and I think that makes sense because the types of people that like are pulled into those different categories like tend to have different temperaments. Like they tend to have different not even just life experiences, but just different ways of looking at the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that is like the most key thing to seek to understand in like the quote unquote the other, right, when we try to like figure someone else out. Because I mean, in a lot of these cases, like you said, I mean, it's very, very simple and it's very binary. Like our brains like that binary, like tribal,
sure,
like they are this way, I am this way. Right. And when you actually get into it and you start to realize some of like the more nuanced differences between people within the political parties, then it's like your world kind of opens up and it's like, man, like this is way more complex than I thought it was. And like these people have like actual reasons. Like even if I don't like those reasons, or even if I think those reasons are morally wrong, I can understand where those reasonings come from. And that's the only place, like if you ever want to change someone's mind, or ever like
have a true conversation,
that's the place you have to reach. Like you can't start from the place of this person is bad, this is why they're bad. Like you have to start from the place like, why do they think what they think? Yeah. You know what I mean? So that was like the biggest motivation I think behind it. Like I was just trying to put myself in other people's shoes, even though of course I'm coming to the table with my own biases and level of experience. But
but I mean, I like that so much about that article, man. It was really great because it didn't it doesn't let people rest on their laurels, and just kind of say that this is the way the world is, but rather, you really embrace that notion of nuance and complexity and gray. It's not black and white. The world is gray. There's things that we would like in the heart of our hearts to believe that this is right and wrong, man. But honestly, that comes down to your conditioning, your sphere of influence, and who's influenced you. Where you're from, who you know in your extended circle, all this stuff, man, it plays a huge role. So it's a unique thing. I applaud that article. It's great, man. People really need to latch on to that concept and to be a little more, accepting of that other, so we can have those conversations.
Or at least start there. You know what I mean? At least, I think there's always going to be like major differences in like.
Yeah, you're going to retreat to your side, of course, at some point. Yeah. But at least if you can start the conversation, that maybe we all can kind of come together a little bit,
right.
Maybe not be as tribal or as, partisan or,
Well, to touch on that, I mean, like you use the word condition, like we're all kind of conditioned to be a certain way. I mean, to kind of go back to what you were saying a little earlier about just how like you kind of get into these habitual rhythms in life, and the older you get, you kind of lock into those pathways. I mean, I think something I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. Something I've been thinking about more recently is just the idea that, as life kind of becomes way more just, I don't want to say complex, because like life's always getting more complex, but I mean like in terms of how the internet specifically and like newer technologies have brought all of our, like, the global attention to like a streamlined device and like kind of like hive mind. Like, we're all on Facebook, we're all on Twitter, we're all on Reddit, YouTube, name your platform. We're all playing these video games. Like, we can kind of connect to people from all over the world in very, the blink of an eye, and it's all very centralized. And part of me looks at just the kind of like habitual nature of whatever you want to call it. I mean, you could call it like the capitalist system, the consumerist system, like the kind of direction that all this is moving in. And it feels like a lot of the patterns of behavior that have been like kind of newly introduced with the internet, like the kind of streamlined services like Amazon and Reddit and YouTube and all this
individualistic.
And it's very it makes us more prone, I think, to just like falling in line with like our thinking, because like everything's spoon fed to us at this point. Like we can kind of get into our own. The term is so overly used at this point, but like it really is like an echo chamber. Like you kind of create your own customized world online where you're fed what you want, and you can kind of just get what you want, and then you just continue with your day. And I think a lot of that has led to just like the disenfranchisement. I shouldn't say that. Let me reframe it. It hasn't led to it. Other like systemic factors, what may it be in the education system, may it be in the political or economic systems and all that, which are causing like, income inequality and like student loan debt and like climate change, name your issue, like whatever the thing might be that is causing some type of existential turmoil, like immigration, race relations, whatever. Like all these things are kind of compounded with the internet. Then the internet creates this like habitual pattern where we're all locked into like what we want to know. So then when it comes to actually changing, like when it comes to actually being healthy individuals, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, just like living a balanced life, and overcoming like the adversity and like the feelings of inadequacy or whatever someone might be going through, it becomes way, way more difficult to do that now, because now we have all these mainstream conglomerate distractions like Netflix, like Amazon, like YouTube, that we're kind of siphoned in to this very streamlined world that keeps us all numb. You know what I mean? It's like, do you have any thoughts on like just like how people nowadays may be like struggling to maybe even see a lot of the stuff we're talking about, because it's like, they're so trapped in that cycle of just like habitually waking up, check phone, check favorite websites, go to work, go to school, then like sit in their existential dread about like their debt or their poverty or whatever it might be.
Whatever their issue is.
And then go right back into the escapism, and it just kind of creates like a perpetual cycle.
It's funny, the more we've come together as a internet community or however much the promise of the internet was to bring us together.
It was all a lie.
I just I have some certain reservations, right? Prior to, I'm sure, I don't know, I'm not a scholar in this area, but I can say this much. It seems to me that the internet has this weird thing of making us together and isolated at the same exact time. So then you get really interesting stuff happening, which is where I find it to be. Talk about conditioning, right? Where people can finally say the stuff that they really want to say. It was always
there. Like, they always felt it. Yeah, they always felt it.
But they don't have to worry about it because they're not sitting in a classroom with these people. They're not sitting on the bus with these people. They're not in a public space where we've kind of accepted this. These are general rules of decorum that we shall not, cross over, although we have people crossing those all the time now in high places of office and wherever else. And I'm not casting any names or disparaging comments about anybody, but what I'm saying is the internet allows you to be anonymous, even if you put your name on it. Like, because you're allowed to say it.
Well, even if it's not anonymous, you're behind a screen. It's very safe.
Yeah, you're in a comfort zone, man. Where you can talk about, how you dislike, LGBTQ, communities, or what you dislike about this particular racial group or, ethnic minority or whatever it is, or your own particular religious beliefs and how this, that, and the other, or what women should do with their bodies. And I don't mean to sound like a bleeding heart liberal, but I have a problem with the lack of civility in those kind of conversations because of that gray area, man. You do not know the struggles that someone else is going through, the reasons and complexities behind their decisions, right? So what I think the internet does is it gives mouthpieces to people who ordinarily don't have them. And that's a weird weird thing, right? Because it changes power dynamics, right? So you go to your average classroom, right, and you kind of hear a lecture or you have a conversation in a group. Again, these rules of decorum kind of hold us, maybe not hold us back, but they kind of ensure that the fringe kind of stays on the fringe.
Yeah, it helps glue together civilized society.
Right, where we're not literally trying
society.
to kill each other at all times, right? Because one person in the room has this crazy idea and they can rally a couple people who are maybe somewhat like-minded, but they thought, oh, that's brilliant. That person can actually speak their mind. Let's get behind this. On the internet, man, I feel like people can get behind this stuff and make these comments and everything. Me, I'm always too scared to make any comment because I'm always scared to give my email address because I don't want to get a virus from somebody. You know? I don't want to get phished or nothing like that. You know, so it's a weird thing, man. I find it to be very. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where my mind goes when we start talking about those kind of things. I feel like we are together in a way that we never have been before. We have access to information that is really at times troublesome, right? But at the same time, now everybody becomes an expert.
Right. Well, perfect. So frame it this way then, as an educator, like when you look at this, I mean, obviously, and I've had this discussion with a few different people who work in fields like journalism or whatever, and it's like one thing the internet did is it destroyed, for better or worse, the barrier to entry to these fields.
Yes,
I mean, like now, it's, like you said, it's not just professionals in these voices who have these voices. It's anybody who has a computer or phone, or whatever.
It empowers. It
empowers. Yeah. So obviously, like, there's a degree of positive nature that comes with that. Like, it's given certain like minorities and people who previously would, or even just like random kids from random areas who maybe wouldn't have had an opportunity to get like a traditional education, but are super smart and gifted. Now they have an opportunity. So that's like the one side of the coin. But then the other side of the coin is obviously misinformation. Now there's no like hierarchy to where, or I shouldn't say hierarchy. There's no hierarchy of credibility for where the information is. Like, you have a PhD, you're a college professor, you're an academic, you write these papers, but like on the internet, you are on like this level playing field with just Joe Schmo. So like, how do you compare those two things or whatever?
It's really hard at times, man. And it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because it does equalize us, right? In ways that is beautiful, but at the same time, terrifying. You know what I mean? And like, it's funny you mentioned that, man. I wrote this song a little while ago about Google, right? I think you might have played it for me.
Yeah,
exactly. Right? It's about, it's a song, right? And I have to give credit where credit's due. It was an episode of the Freakonomics podcast, which is really
great
cool.
Podcast.
Awesome podcast. Shout out to them. Maybe they'll sponsor you, Yeah, so they had this guy on talking about how we don't lie to Google. We lie in every aspect of our lives. Little white lies, big, cardinal sin kind of lie. We do them all, we have every kind of thing. But the one place we don't lie is when we type something into the Google search bar, man. And that's profound, right? Because people who are otherwise scared to ask questions can now ask those questions. They go to their doctor to talk to them about some mysterious rash that they have, which comes up in the song.
I was gonna say,
but you get paralyzed by social stigma and all these things, and I think it's a beautiful thing that the internet can empower that truth. The problem with that is the lack of credibility, like you pointed out, right? There's a vulnerability in truth, right? Because truth requires an investment. Truth requires that we seek it out. You know what I mean? That you really look for it and seek it out.
Right.
Right? But there's so much possibility now that we can get stuck in these channels, these avenues, whatever you want to call it. We don't have to call it an echo chamber if we don't want to, but you can easily find the information that you want to find. You know what I mean? You can find similar voices, which is exactly what it's beautiful about building community on the internet. My problem is I don't have any time or patience for hate. You know what I mean? I don't have any time or patience for things that go against the laws of physics, like flat worlds.
Yeah,
you know,
flat Earth. I was gonna say you're describing the birth of the flat Earth movement.
But this is the thing, right? Previously, this probably would not have been a thing,
of course,
right?
Without the internet, yeah.
But now that there are people, I thought the same thing. I can see pretty far where I live in Iowa or wherever I live. It looks pretty flat. I live on the coast, in Jersey, and I can see pretty damn far, and it looks flat.
Yeah.
So then you get other people saying the same thing. Well, of course it's flat, and then Joe Schmo with this little bit of information can bastardize it, and then there's no one there to check it. There's no verification. There's no vetting process.
Safeguards, yeah.
Right. So again, truth is something we have to seek out, and we have to put our faith in it and believe in it. But I'm scared with the ability to put our faith in things that are clearly detrimental to organized society.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And it sucks because there's no I've spent a bulk of this podcast, and the guests I've had on talking about this specific topic, because it seems to interest everybody from all walks of life. Everybody kind of approaches it at a different angle.
Way, yeah.
Yeah, but it hits all of us, and I think it's fascinating because, to your point about no one is an authority on any of these given areas of say Reddit or YouTube or wherever and we're trapped in this weird, like you said, it's kind of like a dichotomy where part of us wants that. Part of us wants, whether it be the government or some form of regulation, whether it's self-imposed or government-imposed, whatever it might be.
We don't even want it sometimes. We expect it other times. We expect it.
Well, we look at certain communities online, on Twitter or YouTube, where we think, that seems like it needs some type of moderation. And then we think, wait, there's other communities that thrive completely on their own. They almost elect their own moderators, like Facebook groups, private Facebook groups or subreddits on Reddit or whatever it might be. So it's this weird thing where in those cases, I feel like we've never, it feels like an impossible task of caught in between these two hyperbolic things. It's you have the free speech absolutists who are no moderation, let people do whatever they want, and obviously that leads to chaos. That's anarchism. Essentially, it's just no government, nothing. Let's just let the whole thing run wild. But then on the other side, it's let's just regulate it. But then we all know that if it was just purely regulated, it would probably ruin a lot of those spaces.
We'd be banning YouTube they do in some countries around the world.
Yeah, exactly. Tons of countries just censor all these major social media websites. So it's what is the balance between having some level of safeguard, some level of astute, prestigious, even if we've kind of broken down these barriers of these higher learning, higher academic authorities in these different areas, but we need them to reel back a lot of these areas where we've just completely lost the plot. And it's
I think that point you're making is exceptionally important because we all want to be the couch psychotherapist or the couch, physician.
Yeah.
We're I'm going to
we want to solve the problem.
I'm going to Google this hangnail. It looks like it's infected. How do I know it's infected? Oh, well, it hurts. I have a slight fever and there's a red line running up my leg. It's got to be an infection. WebMD, right? So, but these are the bizarre things because regardless of what happens, whether you diagnose it yourself or not, there's still a gatekeeper that you have to go to if you want to get treated properly, I would think. But when it comes to things back to the article you wrote, political opinion.
Yeah, just ideas in general.
Right,
ideas.
There's no one there to tell you that this is valid or not. We kind of have embraced that element of free will anarchy, if you will, to coin a phrase, right? It's something that we cherish and because we can find that voice that's similar to ours. But the problem with that is, and that's when you get, extremists on both ends of the spectrum. And I don't have, I try not to suffer too many fools in my life, and that could be on either side of that aisle or that spectrum.
Or in the middle.
I really, yeah, that's true. But they could be anywhere. I want to go back to that concept of we have to, or I hope, this is again my eternal optimism. I hope that people will kind of hope, that they'll see through at some point that illumination, that this moment will happen where things will clarify, right? There will be this, this moment of clarity that will come out of it because they've sought the truth.
Right.
I hope that's in everyone's psyche, almost as human beings. Maybe we're not wired for that though. Maybe evolutionarily we're not. These are big questions, Nathan. I don't know, man. I wish I could answer it for you and then moderate all the yahoos.
Of course, don't. Everything you're saying is factually correct. The podcasts are they're 100% fact based.
Right.
No, but I think to what you're saying there. I mean, I think as an educator, I mean, when you look at just how, I guess using your framework of the education system, sort of in contrast to the internet, because the education system is one of the classic institutions where there are gatekeepers, there are people of authority. It's how do you feel?
Oh, so okay, as one of those quote unquote peoples of authority,
yeah.
I watch the institution of higher education be eroded day by day. Right? It's being eroded. Yeah. Whether we acknowledge it or not. Most people don't want to hear about this. But the degree you have from whatever university you have does not mean as much as it did 60 years ago.
Right.
And one of the reasons is the people we give that authority to, those gatekeepers, so to speak, they are no longer enfranchised by the institution they work for. 60% of people teaching college classes across our country are adjuncts. And I'm an adjunct. I mean, I'm like a glorified adjunct. I teach 3 classes a semester at this particular institution I work at. And, it's a small liberal arts institution right here in Philadelphia. Wouldn't be too hard to figure out which institution that is. You can probably Google me. It's probably up there, right? But
gonna get you fired, bro.
I'm an adjunct, man.
Yeah, right.
What am I going to get fired from?
We're going to protest you, right? Do something.
I'm going to get fired from a non-existent contract, right?
Yes, exactly.
Or they're going to take away from me my non-existent health care, or the non-existent element that is all the benefits that I would ever want to be, to talk about financial and or, life satisfying elements of being an educator, like protections from, against people criticizing my freedom of thought,
right.
All the things that we valued in tenure, right? That now don't exist anymore because tenure track positions at universities are disappearing. The authority, the gatekeepers, the true folks who do this thinking for us, and or at least that we look to say, well, what do they think? The Noam Chomskys of the world, right? These are the folks who are slowly being eroded.
Yeah.
You got your degree from Harvard, wherever you went. I don't know where you went, but I'm saying, this is hypothetical, but whatever you went to, your degree is only, in my opinion, worth as much time as you spent with people who the university deems to be those gatekeepers, those real true people. Maybe I have an axe to grind. I don't know, but my biggest problem with that kind of stuff, is that there's a lack of ultimate responsibility because these adjuncts, like myself, I'm an adjunct. I am exploited. I'm exploited.
Right.
My time is not worth to the university the same as someone who's a tenured faculty, or tenured or even a full-time staff member who teaches the same program. They're paid far better. So where's my ultimate? And I think that I'm pretty diligent in my work, but at some point, right, you probably have to beg the question of why universities struggle with things like retention. Well, how much contact have they had with people who are also retained by the institution, right? Well, if they've only had 40% contact, right, with those folks, well, what's their likelihood of staying at that institution, right?
Right. It's not great.
Exactly. So these people who hold the keys, right, these gatekeepers of information, they're myself in many regards, and I question, and my own motivations. I question them, when I'm not supported by the place I work for, when I'm not, and that's across the country, man.
I was going to say,
it's a national rate, 60%.
When do you think this erosion started in the education system or in the university specifically?
It's just been happening across the board. I mean, what's been happening is that universities are continuously forced to meet a bottom line. They're no longer. I mean, and if you look at other institutions around the world, of higher education, obviously our most common comparison would be to Canada and to Europe, right? Well, in the European situation, we have a pretty much a state-funded university situation. So people pay very little to go to those institutions. It's a very small amount of professors who teach there. But if you teach there, you're more or less protected by the institution, or they sign off on your abilities.
Yeah.
But in the American scheme, I like to call it a scheme because higher education anymore is a problematic thing, and it's a bubble, and there will be a burst of this bubble. And it's a scheme because we've told people that the only way to true success in this new world that we have, this is probably post World War II, this world where we're now becoming this consumer society. We're a service-based society. We don't manufacture the way we once did. How do you get ahead? You go to school. You go to college. That's the only way to true success. Look at every high school in the local area, right? They're obsessed with a big number.
Yeah.
It's their acceptance to college number.
Yeah, exactly. How many kids did they get to college? Yeah.
What should that matter? You know what I mean? Ultimately, as a society, we should be sending our best and brightest to the institutions. And the other folks should be going into different types of labor and different types of things. But we've done away with all our vocational schools. Yeah. We've done away with all of our trade schools, for the most part. We've told those people that they should try to go to college, and we frown upon that guy who wants to turn pipe for a living.
And a lot of them are getting left behind then, and
that whole thing. And I have a real problem with that. I have a real problem with that because I feel like we need every type of person in society. We don't need 100% college graduates. We need people who like to build things. We need people who like to serve people. We need people who like to solve mathematical
or just
problems.
Entrepreneurs, people that start businesses.
We need all kinds of people, man. But if you tell everyone they need to go to the university and get this sheepskin, and then you start taking away from what the university is, so a liberal arts institution does not mean what it once did. Today, you can get away with, and the institution I teach at, you can get away with taking a single foreign language, one semester. That's it. You can get away with taking, one philosophy class. That's it. If you're at a religious institution, you might have to take one religion. Go back 20, 30, 40 years, and you would have spent multiple classes exploring multiple ideas that we consider to be humane or humanities-based, right? These are the things that make us human, right? The things that we all used to agree upon, that that there was a conditioning of the mind, right? That you have to subject yourself to in order to be more human. Right now, we're getting rid of humanities programs left and right. In fact, in West Virginia, at Jesuit institution, I forget what it was called, maybe Jesuit University down there, they got rid of their entire humanities program, like overnight.
That's insane.
Overnight.
So everything, like economics, sociology, psych.
All of it. All they have now, from what I gathered, from what I read in the article on the Chronicle of Higher Education, they have nursing and business.
Wow.
But tell me, Nathan, what are you going to sell to me as a businessman if you don't understand my motivations and drives?
Exactly.
How well are you going to do as a nurse if you can't understand that all men are mortal? Right. I don't mean men in a pejorative or misogynistic way. I mean all humankind is mortal. If you haven't studied things that make us human, how well are you going to do in these different types of fields? And that's part of what I mean by this erosion, right? And the gatekeepers, right? They're people like myself, and not to disparage myself, but I'm not enfranchised by the institution. Where are my motivations? Where do they lie? And I say this in order to be devil's advocate. I hope my motivations are altruistic and they come from a good place.
Of course.
But in reality, I know people like myself who have to work at 4 or 5 different institutions to pay rent.
Right.
How can I have any allegiance to the place, or this profession that I've dedicated my life to, if I'm working at 4 different places to do it?
Yeah.
To get a level of living that doesn't even include any type of protection for retirement, any type of health care or insurance, or any type of protection from the institution. If someone should call me out and say that this professor and his ideas, he's out of line, right? Well, the institution won't protect me. I'm an adjunct. I'm not tenured. I'm not protected. They have no investment in me. So how much can I give of myself? How much can I invest in you, the institution, if you don't invest in me? This is the erosion I'm talking about, man.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know about it if they're outside of that field. But being inside of it, I can see it, and I can see the writing on the wall because I struggle. And I've applied for multiple different, jobs and positions. And there's a glut in the market. There's a lot of people like me, believe it or not, who are willing to do this work and willing to be unsecure in their livelihoods. I mean, I continue to do it year after year. Right. So it's an exploitative thing, right? So if you're exploiting the people who are the gatekeepers of truth and knowledge, I mean, where are we going to get?
Right.
Who's going to ultimately say this? On top of the fact that if you're taking away what made universities what they were, right? They're not colleges. They're meant to be places where you can study wide varieties of things. If you go to a university and they tell you there's no room for electives, walk away.
It's like, what am I doing here?
What am I doing? How am I engaging that?
What am I paying for? Where's my what's this experience?
And it comes back to that thing that we talked about in the very beginning of our conversation tonight. That moment, that spark, that passion that I felt in the classroom as a student, that would not occur. I hope it still does. But I wonder how often or if it would occur at the same rate or if it would even occur to me in today's classrooms at that same institution that I teach at now.
Yeah. Because like kids are being forced to take certain classes or pushed to take certain ones while other ones are being stripped away, and their entire attitude as they've kind of been conditioned over their educational career as young people.
They know better than me, anyways. Coming in the classroom,
so they're already kind of jaded and seeing things a certain way.
And to be honest, man, Nathan, maybe they do know better than me because I mean,
kids are pretty smart nowadays.
Exactly, they're going to go into a profession where they can actually feed their family.
Right.
Me, it's debatable.
Get out of here. Well, you talk about being like kind of like a bubble that's going to burst at some point, and going back to this idea that, I mean, obviously, like this whole we're talking about like massively complex issues and whatever, but like
super complex.
So you kind of touched on just the idea like our economic system has changed and like our industries have changed, the technology's changed, all that. So granted, obviously it's a very complex monster that has like driven the education system and as a whole, but specifically higher learning to the point that it's at now. As someone who's inside of it, like do you see any? Obviously, I'm not expecting you to have some all-encompassing solution, but do you see any like immediate area that could be changed, or do you feel like it's more all rooted in like a systemic level that would require like policy changes and funding changes? And
I mean, it's a big. I mean, it's almost like a cultural shift that needs to occur.
Okay.
Like, and I mean, if you want the more philosophical question, is or the answer there, it would be it's a cultural shift that needs to occur. We need to treat and think about education differently, right? And education shouldn't be a means to an end, right? It should be an end in and of itself.
Right.
Becoming educated should be something we all value, rather than something that builds value for us, or like all these statistics that come out that this university's education is proven to be one of the most value adding.
Of course.
I mean, listen to this. Like your education adds more value to your life financially. That's what they mean when they publish these numbers. Not will this enrich your life. They're talking about riches, what I mean? And it's a whole different thing, man. And for me, it's a cultural shift that needs to happen. We need to return to a way of seeing the world in through more, humanistic eyes, right? And that doesn't mean you have to be a bleeding heart liberal. It doesn't mean you have to be the most staunch, ivory tower conservative either. But there's got to be a way that we can kind of start to value the pursuit again. You know what I mean? Let's value that pursuit of knowledge. Let's value the end in and of itself that is education, right? Becoming educated people. The Buddhists believe, right? And part of the individual is that there needs to be an engagement with that spiritual, intellectual side. Mm-hmm. And I think we've lost that in not just in American society, but in Western civilization in general. I think we've lost that sense of community that needs to drive the pursuit of knowledge, and knowledge should have some kind of impact upon your community, right? It should have some kind of thing that connects us to each other, and the more we strip away the programs and the things that used to connect us, like foreign language programs, for example. I'm a foreign language teacher, for the all intents and purposes. I'm lucky these days when I get to teach a foreign language class. I'll go a whole year without teaching a foreign language class.
Yeah.
Because we've taken away all the requirements. No one has to take foreign language anymore.
Right.
I mean, how else to connect people than to speak the language? It teaches you more about your own language than any other type of program ever would. But yet, that's typical across our country right now. We're doing away with foreign language programs left and right, you know? And I find it to be highly problematic. So that's the philosophical solution. The very practical solution would be simply to say, let's not fund our institutions on the backs of our students.
Yeah.
let's cover that. And that, I'm sorry to say, that is not a particularly liberal concept, right? There are many countries around this world that we would not look at and say that's a liberal or left-leaning place, but yet they cover school. They
or at least more of it than...
It's publicly funded for the most part.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that institutions should be publicly funded. And that might mean that someone like me will no longer get employment at that institution. But if that means that the education that someone does get, it will be more fundamentally sound, I'm all for it.
Well, just going back to this idea of kids growing up through the education system, then reaching that point, that crucial decision point of whether I go to college or not, and they look at the stats and they talk to maybe their older sibling or their best friend's olher sibling or whatever, and they're like, oh, like you're being straddled with $100K in debt. Yeah, it is a very not just a daunting thing to look at, but also just a discouraging point of entry where then your mindset shifts from what you're talking about, from this whole concept of going to school to learn, to then going to school because I have to do this to make money. And if I make the wrong decision, like if I'm passionate about psychology, but there's no jobs in my area, wherever, I don't feel like there's a future for me there, then I'm going to have to go into business. And then it changed the trajectory of how we learn to the degree where we're not really learning what we even feel or are interested in.
There's a divorce, right?
Yeah.
There's a bifurcation that occurs, right? Where passion no longer drives us.
Yeah.
We're driven by something else, and I don't know what that else is. Is it capitalism? Is it the almighty dollar? I don't know, man. But I can tell you this. The students I have in class, majority of them are going into two areas, nursing and business.
So interesting. That's what I would expect.
That's the majority.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not atypical. That's very typical, right? We've been told that there's service industry that we need. Aging population needs to be taken care of. So they're either studying to be pre-med or they're studying to do biology and they're going into nursing or some related field, social work, and maybe perhaps not in that regard. Speech pathology is a big one these days. Or they go in the business side where they've been told, oh, I can make a lot of money, right? Selling people stuff because we believe in this system. I don't know. I don't know. I worry and I guess it was probably happening when I was in school, and I don't want to sound like I'm that far away from school. I don't think I'm that far away, but it was happening at that point.
Yeah, it's been a slow.
It's been happening for a long period of time. It really does. But that it becomes a big question. You're completely right. If you look at the thing and says, oh man, if I go to this school, I'm gonna get $100,000 in debt. Well, then I better.
Yeah, I better get this specific degree.
Yeah. Otherwise, what am I doing? Wasting my parents' money, or I'm wasting my own time and money. And what do we get out of that? Ultimately, we have this thing, and it's like it's not an idea that I've coined or thought that I'm original thing of it, but we get this delayed adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Where we, into our 30s, we're practically living.
Yeah, 30's the new 20, not in a good way.
Right. We're like living with roommates till we're 30, whatever. And not that that's a bad thing. It's great living, communally, as long as you're choosing to do that, not because you've been forced to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're like economically in dire straits and you have to.
Well, you're kind of like an indentured servant for a while because you got this loan that's straddling you down. So, I truly feel for the folks that have been burdened this way, because I don't feel like it's a good direction, and that's part of what I mean. I mean, it's all a big part of this conversation when we talk about the erosion of what it means to be educated today. What is the erosion of a true collegiate university education?
Right.
I don't know if it's happening. Now, I'm sure there are some institutions that still hang on to that core of liberal arts
Of course,
and humanities.
there's exceptions, yeah.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that exists. But I think it's becoming disproportionately focused on the service industry and the business world, which before the Second World War, you could go and study those things, but you'd be at what we used to call trade school, and that wasn't a dirty word.
Right.
Because now it's a dirty word.
Yeah.
Trade school's a dirty word in this country, and so is, tech school. These are dirty words. Think about them. They have negative, pejorative
they're
connotations.
tied into the culture wars in a way.
Right, for me, this is problematic because if we think about what this country was founded upon, this was founded upon Enlightenment ideas that came from some of the greatest scholars of Western civilization, right? Talking about what it meant to be free, what it meant to be human, what it meant to govern ourselves.
Yeah,
this is an experiment, right? And we've gone so far down that rabbit hole that philosophical conversation doesn't occur, fundamentally the way I think it should. And maybe that's just maybe I am a bleeding heart liberal. I don't know, man.
No, I don't think so.
But,
I mean,
but I do have I have these feelings that we need to spend more time, learning about life. I really do. I know that sounds very like I'm going to go out and hug some trees in a minute, but learning about who we are as people. I mean, what greater thing is there really to learn?
Well, here's the catch-22, or the interesting thing I should just say about that is that where that's occurring now is not the education system, but on the internet.
There you go.
So that's occurring on YouTube, podcasts, like on Twitter, Reddit.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like you kind of throughout all that. I mean, you touched on. I would consider like the more visceral, like policy level of the problem, where it's like, okay, I mean, like kids are struggling. Like there's the financial element and like the like what has actually changed over decades of institution and all that. So that's the one, I guess, side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, which you hinted on earlier prior to it, was the cultural element of it, how like the attitudes culturally have changed. And so I'd be interested to know what you think about this. I mean, just on its face at least, it seems just like I was saying, like that the internet, like again, lowering the barrier to entry, no more gatekeepers, everyone's kind of on there doing what they want.
Right.
With that, like the plus side of it is this whole concept of limitless ideas, where like you could be a phenomenal teacher and maybe you don't work at a college or a high school or whatever, and you're just on YouTube giving lectures. So like you have this entire like form, this entire like endless amorphous blob, I guess, of resources for people who are like going to learn, and like in some ways it's misinformation, in some way it's information, kind of depends on where you fall.
Right.
Either way, that's happening right now, and it's interesting how I think the culture war, it seems, is kind of like at odds, where you have like there's still like an element of like the elitist notion of like the education system, where like there's higher learning, there's the like the more, I guess, just naturally liberal-ish, leftist leaning people who are like they have a higher education and they want to talk about whether it be philosophy, psychology, like Marxism and economics, whatever it might be. You have like those people, but then on the internet you have like essentially like the school of YouTube. You have the people who are like who maybe are those disenfranchised people who would have gone to trade schools or whatever. Now they're at home and they're able to just like jump on these websites, learn about a bunch of stuff. Whether it's good or bad isn't the point, but it's just the idea that they're doing it in this way in contrast to the people who are going to college still. Yeah. So do you see, like, in terms of like how like specifically like universities and colleges and all that have evolved their own programs, like do you see it almost being a problem that there's not more of like an intersection of like how I don't know how to explain this. Like imagine like me. I'm some dude. Let's just like paint a picture of me as an example. Not literally me, but just say me. Where say I didn't go to college at all, and say like I self-educate. What do you call when you self-educate? You're
autodidact.
Yes, thank you. So that's me. That's me. And I've taught myself some subject that I feel like I'm really great at. I open up a channel on YouTube, get hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I have academics reaching out to me, being like, "Wow, this is great work." Whatever. Do you think there should? And a great example of this would be Dan Carlin. Do you ever listen to him?
No, I don't know if I'm familiar.
He has a podcast called Hardcore History, and he does like his own another podcast called Common Sense, but that's like his main one. And he does these like some of them are 8-hour, 10-hour series where it's like multiple parts where he goes off on like a historical event, like the Mongols or World War II, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And he's not a historian. He's just like a nerd essentially who's obsessed with history. And it's the biggest history podcast in the world. So like now that his podcast is blowing up, he gets like tons of historians referencing his work, and he's like kind of part of that community in a way. But so all that to say, do you think that we're at the point now where there is some level, again, referencing the fact that not all of it's good, some of it's misinformation, but there are these people who access this level of self-education and like, I guess, what are we going to call it? Like they've made a platform for themselves by themselves through the internet. Do you think that there should be some kind of bridge for people like that into the education system? Because like obviously like the traditional education system is for someone like you who goes to school like all the way through, gets a PhD, and then like you're like the guy for that subject. But now it's like, again, it's like you're kind of like you're battling against your peers, and then there's this whole new world on the other end of the culture wars who's kind of like they're creating their own thing. So, and to be fair, most of those people that are like at that high level, at least, they're successful already. They don't need universities necessarily. Like they already have like funding from Patreons and they're in YouTube ad dollars, whatever. But all I'm saying is that would it be wise for universities or even high schools, like just schools in general, to kind of create some kind of bridge between those cultural elements of the internet, that the education that the internet's created, and then the traditional institutions? Or are they always like kind of doomed to be the separate thing?
I don't think they are, doomed to be separate. I think they're, just a little, anecdote out of my own life. My son tells me all the time what he wants to do when he grows up. And, his mother is a neuropsychologist, hopefully soon to be board certified.
Wow.
And his father has a PhD in a fairly obscure field.
He wants to be a gamer.
No, he wants to be a YouTuber.
Even better.
So, like, this is hilarious, right? It cracks me up all the time when he's talking about, like, he wants to be a YouTuber. He wants to create content.
Right.
I mean, he's young. He's 7, so... But, I embrace that. I do embrace that, and I tell them all the time, that's fine as long as you can tell a good story, if you can create good narrative. In my mind, though, it doesn't take away from the pursuit of knowledge, like I talked about before, though. I still think that he would be, it would behoove him greatly, even if he doesn't ever wind up, making a YouTube channel about what he studied. I think it would behoove him greatly to have the kind of education that I'm hoping that we'll have in the future, to return to a humanities-based, way of understanding the world. And I don't mean it has to be only humanities. I wish I had studied more science. I wish I was forced to study more science. I want high level of extremely broad, exceptionally passionate people.
Right.
I want everyone to know a little bit about everything. Maybe that's a little bit unrealistic of me. But I think traditional education still has a place. So that's where I would fall in that conversation. That yes, I think that there's a world of benefit to be gained by allowing people to find that passion, seek it out themselves, teach themselves. But at the same time, I find that the structures of education, the submitting oneself, prostrating oneself in front of that higher mind, still has a function, and it's still the discipline of the mind is an important kind of concept.
When it's hierarchical in a really important sense, I think people kind of demean that value system in today's like kind of egalitarian culture. But I mean, it is an important element to learning. I mean, there's something to be said about. Obviously, like it's one thing if, say, your son grows up to be a YouTuber and he's really great at it or whatever and gets a big channel. So imagining that happening, like a person could do that like him and do it relatively like in any form of ways. I mean, they could do it through hustling 80-hour weeks, or they could just be really good and do it in like 7 hours in a week. Sure. So I mean, like, whereas in institutions of higher learning, I mean, you're forced through the ringer. Like you're put through, like you learn discipline, you learn all these other types of qualities that I think are more difficult to attain on like this solo level of just like your own exploration, because you're kind of like out in the ether figuring it out on the internet, whereas like you have a structure to go through in the education system. It's like a path.
Exactly. If you look, how many people? Maybe this is unfair comparison, but there's not that many utants, you know what I mean, who teach themselves, you know. Or was it utant? It was, I forget who it was, who taught themselves like some of the most advanced math that ever had been seen.
Yeah, mostly educated people.
Unfortunately, there are certain kind of pathways that one has to access in order to gain, the ability to. But man, that is the equalizer, right? The internet is that equalizer. Hey man, I use YouTube all the time too. I go on and learn how to play new things on the guitar, and I walk this weird thing, right? I walk this dichotomy of being an untrained guitar player. I've never been taught.
Neither.
I've never been taught vocal technique, singing. I don't know that stuff. I mean, I studied music to a certain level. I took jazz classes and stuff like that in high school and a little bit, not in college at all, actually. So, I walked that. My daily life is kind of that thing where I believe enough in the power of creativity.
Yeah.
Right? But I said from the beginning that every song I write's a thesis. You know what I mean? So that the notion of higher thought, wherever you get it from, I think it's an important element of it. Education, it just, I can't underscore it and highlight it enough. I feel like it's such an important part of who we strive to be as people and as Americans and as family members, as fathers and mothers and daughters and sons. We all want that for our children. I feel like I want them to have the most opportunity in education. I want them to be successful. I want them to be intelligent. Right? These are all good things, right? And to learn how to use that tool. Yeah, is exceptionally important to me. And as much as there might be that out on the internet for them to find, it's almost a crapshoot.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's scary because you don't know what you're gonna get in a lot of those cases.
And in that regard, if we go back to that concept about seeking the truth, right? Unless you're taught how to seek that truth and taught how to know what's valid and what's not valid, there's a lot of pitfalls. And a lot of rabbit holes.
And this is why I'm interested in the kind of integration between these worlds in some way. Because, I wonder, when I look at, I have a few friends that work in the institutions of higher learning, and something I'm interested in is like the technological aspect of it.
Sure.
Because, obviously, there's now Silicon Valley is almost its own universe, right? And they're kind of always on the cutting edge of creating new products and technologies that get integrated into apps and games and social media platforms and all that. And it's interesting how more and more you get people like your son who are growing up using these games and platforms. They're like, I want to be a programmer. I want to be a game developer. I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be an influencer, whatever it might be. And it's all kind of and that's obviously part of the culture, but that part of the culture is stemmed to the technological industry, whatever you want to call it. So do you see in the future some type of integration between higher learning and the tech industry as they've kind of
I think so, yeah, because if you look at the high schools that tend to be the most competitive ones these days are the ones that have good funding with STEM stuff. Right. Science, technology, engineering, math. I saw someone talking the other day, talking about gaming and fun kind of puns or whatever, but they wanted to see STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, right? That would be kind of cool as well, right? If we could value that the same way that we value, this to be a great thing, right? I don't know. These are great questions. Where I fall down or fall in terms of the conversation, though, I think. I think that schools are doing their best to, acclimate to the 21st century. But the thing is about schools, right? And this goes back to the beginning of our conversation again. We've made a bunch of little turns around. I like it, man. It's good. It's a good conversation for that reason. Is that we need to value education as such, right? And by value, I mean let's fund it. Right. Let's fund it in a way that's, and I don't mean I'm talking about the actual institutions that are public funded. Let's make sure that these kids have access to these, to programming classes, have access to engineering and mathematics classes at high levels. Let's make sure that happens. But the only way that will happen is if we value education. We really put it there, because education takes. Unfortunately, because of the way funding is set up, education is a slow moving thing, and that's not my concept. There's a historian. She's an antiquarian, she calls herself, Patricia Alsberg Graham. She's a professor, and And she likens education in the United States in the 20th century to a battleship. And that a battleship is created to do one thing, right? It's to do battle, right? To do the things that we've said it needs to do, right? So initially it started out to assimilate. We needed to assimilate immigrants. And then it was we need to get them to adjust to life in America, as time moved along. Then it was access. We want to make sure that there's equal access. And this is as, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s access. Now we're at the level of high level of functioning that we want everyone to have. But the problem is that battleship, it does not turn on a dime, right? So education needs the funding to acclimate faster. So I think, yes, that there is and there should be more integration of those kind of things into the classroom. I think you'll find the places where it happens the most frequently are in schools that are in high socioeconomic areas.
Yeah, it makes
because
sense.
They have money.
Which is so unfortunate because don't you see that they're just kind of continuing the divide between
precisely.
class and
what
everything.
What we've done is we've created apartheid yet again, right? But we've done it through economic means. We've resegregated schools, man. And that's not a concept that I came up with either. I mean, this is stuff, documented stuff.
Yeah, right.
The schools have gone from being integrated, blacks and whites and Latinos and Asians were all going to school together, to being essentially segregated.
Right. So now, if you're a affluent family in some district in Philly, and you look at the public school system, you're going to send your kid outside of it to some other more expensive or some private or whatever it might be institution.
Right. And you're going to do everything you can to get them in there.
Yeah.
Whereas the family who's socioeconomically not as well off, they're not going to have the same tools in their arsenal to be able to afford that student the same opportunity. And it's even just knowing when the application dates for the different charter schools is. Simple stuff like that. But if you're working 2 jobs and you're a single parent and you have 2-3 kids, when are you going to find time to do that?
Right.
You know what I mean? And then again, the wealth gap, opportunity gap, every one of those kind of gaps that people talk about, that's the kind of very, trendy word these days.
It is.
But those are the things that are growing exponentially in our country, and I don't know what the answer is to that, but I will say this: I think that science and technology and all that needs to be definitely brought back into the classroom, at a heavy level. But that conversation needs to go in hands in hand with how we're going to fund it.
Yeah.
And that can we make sure that the school in the city gets the same amount of funding that the school out in the suburbs does? And can everybody be a little less selfish about it? Because no one wants to see their tax dollars go to pay for some school, half a state away.
Right.
So how do we fund it on a little more egalitarian basis? How do we make it a little bit more how do we make equal access, man? How do we create equality, man?
Yeah. And you have to add.
But if we're not studying humanities at the university level,
exactly. How do
you know what equality means?
Yeah, you're creating a generation of people who are just completely out of the loop of any of these basic, or to us, or maybe basic philosophical, sociological concepts.
Yeah, but if you haven't been exposed to things like Oliver Twist, or you haven't read Les Miserables. If you haven't been exposed to these things that speak to the darkest and also the most beautiful things in us, where's your motivation to ensure that there's equality? I don't know. Maybe we're talking about really heavy, heady stuff, and I apologize to the listeners, man.
No, it's good. This is why I brought you here. Not really, but I didn't know we'd talk about this, but I love it.
These are conversations that I feel like we need to have that unfortunately don't happen enough.
Right.
And I thank you for letting me.
Of course,
talk to you about it.
And it sucks. So much of it is stigmatized to the degree where we don't know how to approach the topics of funding because we look at it. It has become a political issue in the sense of it's polarized left right. But I mean, even just thinking about it in terms of people's natural incentives toward these resources. 'Cause I mean, talking about a lower income area for like their education system might be terrible, and then it's like, oh well, let's just like pour resources into it. It's like, okay, well you can't just pour resources into it. Like
Right.
you have to give the people in this area or people outside the area to come into the area some kind of incentive to build the area. So it's like this like massively complex series of conflicts.
Look at Mark Zuckerberg. He tried to solve the problem in Newark.
Yeah.
Or Newark. Not Newark.
Right.
Not,
Did
not
they
Delaware.
pour a bunch of funding into
They put
it and it just
$100 million
didn't work at all?
into Newark, New Jersey. That was a couple years ago. $100 million. I think it was him and maybe it was Bezos. Whoever was one of these big corporate. I don't know if it was Bezos. It was probably Gates. I think someone was involved. They put $100 million into the Newark school system, and ultimately they didn't have any real.
Yeah, it was the Gates Foundation, I think. Now that
but
you said
Zuckerberg
that,
was
I think
involved
it was,
with it. I think, but so they put all this money in this area, but it didn't really fundamentally change what was happening there.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, it's not just simply a matter of dollars, but it's also about funding in terms of how do we staff these schools?
Yeah.
Making people realize that being an educator is equally as valuable as the guy who's going to design your next nuclear power plant.
Right.
It's equally as valuable as the guy who's going to create awesome content for you on a podcast like yourself,
right.
Or it's going to be equally as valuable, to the person who's going to, get the next, man on the moon or woman on the moon.
Yeah.
As is the next person who stays at home and takes care of his kids. We have to start seeing, more value in people.
Right.
Man, maybe that's really what.
Well, let me ask you this: like at your where you teach specifically, you don't have to say where, but like specifically there, do you ever end up in a situation where you have not literally like this existential level, but do you have these types of conversations with these students? Like, do any kids come up to you and are basically like, I don't know what to do, or like I'm kind of at a crossroads here, or like whatever. Like, do you ever get into these altercations?
So I was walking into campus probably a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, and this kid stopped me on the way. He says, "Dr. Ager," and I said, "Hey, how are you doing?" Had no idea who he was, no idea. He's like, "I really want to thank you. I teach part of this. I'm a part of this thing called. Anyways, it's a program that has like a short segment in the summer before they get to campus in the fall, and it's about like study habits and kind of what it means to become a good academic citizen. And one of the spiels that I love to give, even though it's not like in the book that they give us to teach this class, one of the spiels is about finding your passion, because I just like to throw it in there because I believe in it fundamentally and wholeheartedly, that you need to be inspired by what you're studying. It's the best way to be good at it.
Of course, yeah.
Right? So I always talk about, follow your passion. Don't worry about the job you're going to get later. You get hired by some law firm, they're going to teach you litigation. They're going to teach you court procedure. You get hired by a business firm, they're going to teach you, the particular things they want you to know.
Of course, yeah.
They're going to train you. Every institution, every corporation, large financial institution will teach you the things they want you to know. So why not spend your time while you have it studying the things that you want to know? You know what I mean? So I say this to them every summer before school starts. And this kid who is in one of these classes stopped me on the way, and he's like, "Dr. Ager, I wanted to tell you, it meant a lot what you said to us over the summer." And I was like, "Oh boy, I hope I didn't say something asinine or something that was so trivial, whatever." This kid's out, telling everybody I said some crazy. Anyways, he says, "Yeah, it was really important to hear that that I don't have to take economics because my parents wanted me to take. I'm studying. I think he was doing he moved to digital arts or something like that. So he's doing Dart stuff or whatever they call it.
Yeah,
now.
right.
Because he likes like advertising. He thinks it's cool and like he's into that. And he's like, I really want to appreciate you saying that, because I was kind of told what I should study before I came here. And I'm kind of putting words in his mouth, but that's kind of where he was coming from. It was a very informal conversation, but he was saying these kind of things to me, and I walked away, and I still didn't know the kid's name. I couldn't remember, but I have these conversations probably more frequently than the university would prefer that I have these conversations, because I believe, like, again, wholeheartedly, to the core of my essence and who I am, the core of my being, my essence, I believe that we need to pursue our passions, in a positive way, Now, if your passion is,
serial killing.
Don't
be the next Dexter.
Exactly. Yeah. If that's your passion, well, we're going to part ways. But I believe people's maybe it's back to that fundamental concept of believing people are good. I want to believe that. So whatever your passion is, I want these students to do that. So I do to answer your question. Yeah, I do talk to the students in this way, in a very real way. I was like, ask most people who are employed anywhere you go, ask them what they studied. And I bet you, 7 times out of 10, it won't be exactly in the field.
Yeah.
And today, even more so in this gig economy that we're kind of, facing, people do different things for long periods of time. Yep. Will have multiple different careers within one lifespan. Yeah. So like this to me was a brilliant thing. And maybe I get that from my dad because he was employed by like 12 or 13 different companies over his time. And he was, what today you classify as a mechanical engineer. Yeah. But he was all self-educated, never went to college, passed over 1 million times, different gigs because he never had a college education. And my dad instilled upon me this concept that education is important, and it didn't matter what I was studying. He didn't care. It was almost the fact that you just have to go through that process of disciplining your mind, of kind of learning how to think. Yeah, right. Learning to think critically.
How to think, yeah.
And you can learn that probably on YouTube, man. But you could also probably learn how to make firecrackers and what my son likes to watch, how to make things on Minecraft. Yeah. I don't know if that
or you can break your brain into like how to think about like just conspiracies and just like not exactly. You don't develop the critical thinking skills.
Yeah. So I mean, I try to impress upon my students, that and maybe I do it in songwriting too, man. But I try to impress upon people that passion. Right. Passion is paramount.
For me, it's like I said this a few times on the podcast, man. There's been I literally have lost count at this point. I mean, hundreds of primarily kids, I'd imagine, have reached out to the Steakum Twitter account or my personal Twitter account. They found me through that account somehow, and they DM me or DM the account asking literally just like, I'm in college or I'm in high school. I don't know what to do. I'm at a crossroads. Wow. What should I be doing? And it's interesting because I think a lot of it stemmed from just my job particularly. Like these kids are seeing it and they're like, oh, this is like a funny, weird, like he's making memes or whatever. I make memes. How could I like do this in some kind of field or whatever? But it's just so interesting because like so many of them to that point, like they're trying to get into some field of like where they're interested in. Like these are mostly people who have spent a large amount of time on the internet, so they're like deeply embedded in these subcultures. Sure. So they're seeing like a subculture with a job, and they're like, oh, like this is something I could do. Like, how could I get into this? But I mean, it's amazing how many of them, like, it all stems back to this concept of they just don't. They feel torn, like you had mentioned, between like what their parents or what like the greater culture is telling them they should do for a career, for a degree, and then what they want to do. And it's like this crazy, it's always been a crossroads for people. But I think today it's especially just volatile because it's like because of the student loan debt and because the gig economy and everything's changing. Like the people, even in my industry, quote unquote, of like advertising, marketing, whatever, like a lot of the people I know that are social media managers or are like brand representatives or brand ambassadors, whatever it might be in some way, a lot of them have come from like journalism degrees or like or I'm trying to think like specifically like it could be copywriting, it could be English majors, it could be like all these different, or even just graphic design, like it could be all these different creative fields, but then they end up going through like they're working at like a PR firm, they're working at like they're representing some brand and like in sales or whatever it might be. Like it's all these, they kind of go through the ringer in terms of like business communications, like all these areas of expertise, and it's never, like you said before, it's never a linear trajectory. It's always this kind of like
waltz,
zigzag, like back and forth of them figuring it out. And I think that's the most important thing I try to like instill to the people that reach out to me, because I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is like from my own personal experience and the experience of other successful people that I follow, I'm like, this is like their trajectory, and like it either all starts in college or it all starts in some like you putting the work in. Like some of the people I know that do social media management specifically, or like YouTubers and all that, they or I should say the people that work in the industry of advertising, a lot of them pick out potential employees from YouTube, from Twitter. Like they'll look for YouTubers with a bunch of subscribers or Twitter accounts with a bunch of followers, and they'll literally scout them and be like, do you want to work here? Because they can clearly see what they're doing is successful.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like people are coming to the table from whether it is higher learning or whether it is just like putting in the work. But either way, you just have to pick it. You just have to do it. You know what I mean? Like some people do like the balance really well. I know people that, like a lot of younger kids that are going through college right now and also like on the side do these funny Twitter accounts or YouTube accounts.
Right.
And they're kind of like balancing both. And
that's impressive.
It is impressive. It is. When you look at the creative output, I'm like, man, how do you guys have the time for this? Like they're on it all day. I'm like, when are you even studying? But it's interesting because it's like kids are just at like this really this stage of life with the internet. I think everything's just they're so inundated. You know what I mean? Like they're shoved so many decisions and things that they could be doing, and they don't really. It's not that they don't have direction, because they have direction. I think in a lot of cases they just don't know. On one hand, what's going to be profitable.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what they're going to like, if they're going to love doing what they're doing. What's going to like whatever it might be, and to have people in higher learning, kind of helping be the compass to those decisions is so important.
Yeah.
It's like and in most cases they're not getting it from their parents, and like we've kind of
and arguably they're not getting it in the higher institutions.
Well, that's what
either.
I'm saying.
That's
like,
problematic.
And I feel like I talked to someone about this recently as well. Like we've kind of like obliterated this whole concept of mentorship in culture. You know what I mean? Like we're like used to have like village elders.
Right.
And, like we look to like the older like retired people for like wisdom. Like you don't really see that.
No.
It's all like people are like wilting away in retirement homes, and it's like they have all this wisdom and stuff to offer, but like it's become this like weird resource economy that we look toward the young and like the astute, and these like I don't know, like there's this divide I think in how we approach wisdom and like approach emotional intelligence, and it's not as diverse I think as it could be. You know?
No, I'm 100% in agreement with you. There's a educator. Her name's Bell Hooks. She's a feminist, but a college professor, and she wrote this really phenomenal piece of writing I think it's probably about 20 years ago now that she put it out. But she talks about her students, the ones she has in her college classrooms, and she says that they are fundamentally and to no fault of their own wounded in their psyches, deeply wounded in their psyches, her exact words. And they, on one hand, have very difficult time in self-actualization.
Yeah,
right? That
right.
kind of
that like level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that like up top. Yeah,
they have they have a high, they have a hard time at that, while at the same time demanding that the instructor teach them something that is worthwhile and valuable in their lives. Yeah. So it's kind of she's referring to to part of what we talked about earlier about like kind of the breakdown and what's happening in our education system, that we're creating people that don't know how to self-actualize, and maybe I'm part of that I was probably a student when she was writing that, and I think that thing has only become more prevalent, right? There's students that they don't know. They fundamentally do not know what it means to self-actualize in the way, or insofar as they don't know what they want to study or what they want to be, what they want to do, because they've been told that they have to do X, Y, and Z in order to be successful. They've been told that they need to do or go or be a part of or whatever that thing is, right, that tells them from externally that this is what you need to do. And then if you hear someone telling you what you need to do all the time, how do you know what to do on your own? How do you think critically? And that's really what it comes down to. How do we teach people to think critically? Maybe that's part of what I was saying earlier. Like, when you seek out the truth, when you really find the truth, that's thinking critically. Yeah. And it takes real effort to do that.
And it's super easy to slide into nihilism when you're when you're going through this process, because the scope of all of it is so daunting.
It
so
sure can be, yeah.
Like do you know the meme? You probably might be a little obscure. It's called the Doomer meme. Have you heard of this? It's a character. You might have seen the character. It. It's like a meme, sort of like Pepe the Frog is like a character. Like it's a character that someone drew, and like it's then like appropriated and used in different contexts. But it's the character character is called Doomer, and there's like a couple variations of him specifically. Like there's like Zoomer and a few other ones, but it's basically like a take on. Like I guess you could call it like the millennial Gen Z. It's like kind of like a broad persona, but the idea behind this character is that it's someone who rejects in some way the notion of like boomers. Where like boomers, like coming like post World War II, had like a lot of they had a lot of like purpose in their life, like coming out of the war, and like they were very like a notoriously happy generation, and like obviously like going in through the next couple decades or whatever, and then like they had their kids, and their kids like they inherited a similar like economy and whatever. This is a broad generalization, but like needless to say, the Doomer is supposed to be like it represents a caricature of like kids nowadays who look at the previous generations and like they're kind of outlooks on life, whereas like some of them may have had like a very strict adherence to a certain religion or political party, and that was kind of like it gave them purpose and trajectory throughout their life. And then like over decades, you know, like you kind of like entered into these different like cultural attitudes of like nihilism and postmodernism and like cultural relativism and all these things that kind of like started popping up throughout like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s to now, where like you have this kind of this character which represents a lot of young people, where it's like you're so inundated by everything that's going on in the world, and everything's seen through a microscope. So like the problems of war and like or foreign policy and climate change and student loan debt and whatever it might be, all these things kind of compound because they're seeing it through a microscope, because everything is like highly centralized, and then it creates this like nihilist
sense of dread.
It's like you become you're very existential, you're very cynical, you're very just like uncertain about like your own identity and your own direction in the world. So that's like what the meme essentially represents. But it's so interesting because it kind of like sounds like what you're talking about, where it's like this directionless.
It's not my idea; it's Bell Hook's idea. But, you know, she had that concept that you know that students today, you know, her students anyways at that time, you know, they felt deeply wounded in their psyche because of that lack of ability to self-actualize, you know, while at the same time demanding that education be practical. Yeah. You know, and I'm all for practical education. I certainly am. But, you know, I want to see practicality be applied to all things, not just business and nursing. And no offense to the businessmen and nurses out there. I love you all too. But we need everybody. We need a broader range. Yeah. We need a broader range. We need I mean, I can't repeat myself enough, probably. I probably have too much. You know what I'm going to say at this point.
No. There was a lot of really good stuff in there. Just kind of like swinging back, I guess, a little bit toward your songwriting. Since we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, which it's so funny. If you would have asked me like what we were going to talk about, I had no idea this was going to be it. But I love it. It's all so fascinating. But like I know, like so you are an adjunct professor, and then I know the last time we talked was at the MaTones session.
Yeah, it was fun, man.
And I think you were talking. I don't remember specifically like everything we talked about, but I do remember us talking about how many shows you had been playing. Like you've been doing. Like is that like will you consider it like part of your job at this point? Because you're doing like tons of these paid gigs, right?
I consider myself like a semi-professional. You know what I mean? Because I depend upon it to live. You know, like financially certainly. And I treat myself as a professional because I want to be respected for my time in art. But yeah, I do about 100 nights out a year. That doesn't include
insane.
That doesn't include like tonight where I'm just like, I should be on a podcast.
Of course,
I'm doing a podcast in a couple of weeks. Another one. So like it doesn't count that stuff. It doesn't count nights where I'm like going to Songwriter nights. So like I say, I'm out about 100 nights a year, doing 100 different kinds of shows, and it could be everything from like your standard money bar gig that. All the musicians out there will know what I'm talking about. It's the cover gig where you got to play other people's songs all night long. Like last year, I got a chance. I was blessed to play at the Philadelphia Folk Fest. So like
amazing.
It's all kinds of shows. So I did I just did a songwriter circle the other night, and tomorrow night I'm playing at a bar. Doing mostly covers.
Right.
So it's a little bit of everything, man. It really is. I'm hoping. And I'm a realist, and I don't try to, fool anybody. I'm an artist first and foremost. So my preference is to play more shows that are my songs. Like
Of course,
I believe
yeah,
in myself
right.
wholeheartedly as a songwriter. I really believe in that craft, and I think I've done really well to hone it. Took me a long time to learn it. You know what I mean? Probably because I didn't study it in the same way, perhaps. I don't know, but
That was sneaky. I like that.
maybe I don't know. But
No,
I will say
totally.
this. I will say that I'm becoming happier with the things I'm writing and the art that I'm creating, and I'm doing more. I'm hoping to do more and more shows that showcase that. That are more specifically in line with that, because that is where I find those moments, those sparks, those passion moments that really keep me doing it.
Right.
When I stop having fun with it, man, I'll probably lay it down. I mean, I'm sure I'll play for myself all the time, but when I stop having fun performing, and performing my music, then that'll be that.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you see yourself doing this into the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I have no plan to stop. Last year I put out a vinyl,
the two-sided single thing.
I did a single called Crunchy Girl, which was a little bit of a critique of modern society.
I loved it.
Half hippie, half hipsters. You know who you are. And that was a single, a double-sided thing, an A and a B side. And I put a politically oriented song out, actually, called Fake News, over in the fall. And then in the meantime, I recorded and released an EP called the Bad Guy EP, about being a domestic bad guy, about being not good at doing the dishes and stuff like that at home. So I have no plans to stop, and I'm putting another single out that I'm working on right now, with a producer in the city.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm like, and that's probably going to be in line with this more political series that I've been doing.
What drove you to make that a pivot?
To do the political stuff?
Yeah, well, even like Crunchy Girl's kind of like a more like in
it's social
that
critique.
region. Yeah, exactly.
So social critique, man, I think it's something I've always appreciated in like the scholars that I encountered. I mean, they were the ones who made me think beyond the particular article or the book I was reading, the ones who connected things to larger issues, or like the theorists that I was reading that then apply it back to like the thing. So Habermas, Jürgen Habermas, and Foucault, and all these great thinkers, and Freud, and anybody who philosophers,
right.
Those folks making social commentary. I mean, I don't like to philosophize in my music, but I definitely like to play with those things.
Yeah.
Even the Google John that I wrote that
exactly.
song. I mean, it pokes a lot of fun at ourselves and the way we lie, but the places we tell the truth, like on the internet. So I don't know, man. What's been making me do that? Probably me caring less that what I'm creating will be consumed by the masses. Like I've embraced the fact that my music will not be liked by all.
Yeah.
And it's been very freeing, and it's also let me create things that I'm immensely satisfied with.
Yeah.
My first few records, I put things out and I was like really hoping that people would like it. You know what I mean? Now to the point where I want people to like it. I hope they like it. But in the end of the day, when it comes down to brass tacks, whether they like it or not is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because I like it. And that's such a freeing thing, man. And funnily enough, people always say that. It always sounds so cliche, like, oh, you can't care about the reception of it, which is a little bit extreme for me.
Yeah.
But there is a kernel, maybe even a bigger than a kernel. It's probably like a avocado corn, like element of truth to that. You have to just embrace the art for what it is and let chips fall where they may. So the pivot, I think it was always there.
Yeah.
But what allowed me to do it is saying, okay, I am who I am. This is my music. I appreciate you for what you do. If you don't like it, that's fine. That's cool. But I'm going to keep creating art. And the only way for me to keep creating art, at this point, I put out 3 records, an EP, a single. I mean, I put out 40 songs at this point.
Right.
And I'm putting them all out myself. If I was worrying about what other people wanted to hear, I think by this point I would have given up. So in order to keep creating art, I have to care about it myself.
Well, it's interesting that you say it's cliche because it is, but like it took you this long to get to that point.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously it's like it might be cliche, but I mean it's one thing to acknowledge it,
Yeah.
and it's another thing to actually reach that point because like
Yeah.
we all care. Like it's
Yeah.
such everybody wants to act like they don't care about
Right.
how other people perceive them, but we all do.
Oh, I
to
totally
some
do.
degree or another. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's literally impossible not to consider like, oh wait, I'm writing this thing or I'm recording a podcast. I wonder how other people are going to perceive me. No one is going. The only people that are able to go into that completely carefree are the people who are like detached from like the broader institutions of society. Like someone like a Joe Rogan who just has like fuck you money and he can just like
Adam Carolla's.
Exactly. Like they're not beholden to a job or like anything, and they have enough money and they don't care. Like they're just saying they're hanging with their friends, saying what they want. But most people who work in like fields of journalism, marketing, music, name it, like they're thinking about like their audience's perception of what they're saying. And
I wish I had that kind of freedom. and you know, in my little like, you know, microcosm of or my microeconomic world in terms of like, you know, the money I earn and make. I'm lucky to have a supportive partner, who lets me do the things I do and doesn't criticize if it's not successful, and encourages me to put stuff out and doesn't, I mean, I don't know. I honestly can say this in all reality. I'm pretty sure she doesn't even like much of the music I put out, but she still supports it, and that's such a beautiful thing.
That's so great, yeah.
Yeah, so if I didn't have that, if I didn't have that kind of freedom, maybe I wouldn't be putting out new kind of things. But I'm kind of like at this stage in the game where I am in my life, I feel like I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Like I'm tired of doing songs that I think will be successful, and I'm just I'm spending more money on recording than ever. Like I'm going out there and literally taking money and putting it where my mouth is and letting my mouth do the talking that I feel like it will. And I feel like I've been writing better stuff because of it.
Yeah.
The Google John is part of that song. The Social Critique, the Crunchy Girl. I mean, all these songs have done better for me. Maybe they haven't gotten a lot of, radio play or anything, but, in terms of like streaming and stuff
phenomenal.
Like that.
Yeah, like phenomenal productions.
And I feel like they sound good. Yeah. Because I'm taking my time, I'm spending the money. And prior to this, I probably should have spent more money. I should have been more, concerned with what the sound was than whether or not you're going to like it. Yeah. So I got hung up on the reception end of things rather than on the creation end of things. And I think that's there is a divide. That being said, I'm still a creature of habit, and I still feel it when an audience does not dig what I'm doing. I had a moment down in D.C. recently. I played this show, the So Far show, and I told the audience, I'm like, "What do you guys want me to do? Play this song? It's a song about my wife and I, or whatever. Or you want me to play this song? It's going to offend you, right? It's D.C., right? So I'm like, of course they're going to want the one that offends them, but I always forget, man. It's a very PC crowd, right? So I sang my song about my preference in the opposite sex, which is girls that have a little more meat on the bone. Yeah. I sang this song. It's my honest to God preference. I like women who have more meat on the bone. That's my thing. Sang this song that pokes fun at that. It's a hyperbolic.
Of course, your songs are very funny.
Yeah, they're meant to be humorous, right? Because there's enough sadness in the world. I don't need to sing about my sadness. I sing about funny stuff, right? Or I try to, at least in part, So I sing about girls with large rear ends, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And my God, you could have heard it like a pin drop in a bad way. In a bad way. After they all said they wanted to hear a song that offended them. No. So I was like, well, what do you really want here? Yeah. People want to be offended, but they deep down they just want to have the opportunity to criticize you. Anyways,
I remember you singing that song at Melody's
Cafe. Yeah, man. Yeah, you probably remember that song.
That, yeah.
I love that song. It plays well in certain markets and other markets it doesn't. But it was funny when I sat there and thought back about it. I was like, I have to stay true to what the art that I want to make, man. Right. And it's been good for me recently. And to be honest, man, I've never been more satisfied.
That's awesome.
With the things I'm creating and like the artwork that I'm coming out with. And part of it is, man, I'm not gonna lie to you, is taking my money and putting it where my mouth is. But also it's been freeing creatively. Like I can be creative and not really care if this next song is gonna be on the radio or not. those aspirations, those, I don't want to call them juvenile, but they're definitely naive.
Yeah.
Those naive aspirations, I think I've not conquered them, but I've put them to rest a little bit.
Right.
And have come to terms with the fact that, I don't think I'll ever be on such a high level. And of course, if it happens, it's great. I would love it. Maybe deep down I really do.
Of course, of course.
It's become more important to me though to create the art.
Right.
And that means something.
And each of us, on some level, deal with the curse of comparison, where no matter what we do, we're always going to compare. Like, everything's relative. Like, our pain is relative. Like, we're going to compare it to the people who have less pain than us, or then with success, like, we're going to compare ourselves to people who have more success than us. And it is such like a cat and mouse game with that, because I remember like 10 years ago, whenever I started trying to do songwriting as like a gig or whatever you want to call it, and I remember thinking like there were certain goals, like milestones that I needed to reach, and then you reach that milestone, and it took you years, like whether it was like getting on a radio station I wanted to get on, or whatever it might have been, or recording a full length album and getting this many copies sold, and you do it. And then you realize immediately that it wasn't all that it was hyped up to be, because you immediately just start thinking about the next thing. Yeah. It's like it's always it's a trap. Yeah, it's a trap to like get caught in that cycle. Because like I think it's there largely for a good reason. Like I think it's good to have some level of self-awareness to how you're coming across in society. Like we compare things. It's good to compare like good and bad, etc. But when it comes to art specifically, it can easily become a cripple, not a cripple, like a crippling thing. You know what I mean? Where it can just destroy your craft.
Yeah, it becomes it comes to inhibition, right? Or is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, inhibition.
It inhibits you. In what you're trying to do, because you're ultimately not thinking about what you should be thinking about, and that's the creation. And I'm not saying I'm any master at this, because I still, like I said, I'm a walking time bomb in many ways. But
aren't we all?
I mean, I can legitimately say that that the recent EP I put out was for me. I put it out for me, and I've never been happier with the way it sounded. You know what I mean? Like
That's great.
The music sounds great. The songs make me laugh. They're the songs that I wanted to put on it, regardless of whether or not they'll ever sell. There's a song on there about the Axeman of New Orleans. There's like a historical figure, right? And I got a chance to write this song, be a part of a panel at the Folk Fest a couple years ago. The first time I played at Folk Fest, and I wrote the song in 4 days for this particular panel, and it came out really well. But when do you get a chance to play a song about an axe murderer, about a serial killer? You don't. So I said, screw it. I'm putting it on this bad guy EP, all about bad guys, different types of bad guys, and I got my Jim Croce Bad Leroy Brown kind of song on there too, and I don't expect it to ever sell. Like I don't. It's such a weird niche thing.
Yeah, right.
Even the artwork for it, like the visual artwork for it's over the top. Like it's me with this crazy handlebar mustache and a top hat, right? Literally stealing candy away from my daughter in the picture.
Amazing.
So like it's. I had a buddy say to me, it's hokey or campy, and I was like, oh yeah, it is.
Right on.
Right on. I'm okay with that, man. Like I embrace that element because, and it's helped me, to be more creative, because now I'm like, ooh, I'm going to write something for this particular project. So like the political series of songs,
right.
It's just a series I'm putting out. Like and I'm using the same artist for them, so like they have a feel and a look. The EPs I'm doing have they're going to have kind of thematic trends now. Like I'm working on a folk EP with the guys at Folk at Turtle Studios down in Philly.
Oh, cool.
Ross Benoit and Jay Levin.
He's a genius, man.
Yes, I'm looking very much forward to beginning that work. We just chatted the other day. We're going to do it. Just a matter of me, being able to save up to put that money where my mouth is, because I believe in that process, and I want people to be paid for their time and efforts the way I want to be paid for my time.
I was just gonna say, so much of it is like a self-respect thing to then have to project that respect to others. Man.
Exactly,
it really
is. It really is important.
Yeah,
and I believe in it wholeheartedly. And it took me a while, Nathan, to get to that point, man. To really get to the point where I can say that's important. The way in which you treat yourself.
It's a tough principle.
And to value your own time, man.
Yep.
It's such a hard thing because, you do things because you believe in them. But at the same time, you also have to value that time,
right?
And give it the proper respect that it deserves. So if you're going to put that artwork out, you better will do it well.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even if that, I don't mean respect yourself always financially, because
of course,
my time is worth $1 million an hour. You know what I mean? As is yours, man. We only get a certain amount. You know?
Right.
Time is the only thing that we really have.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, that's all we really have.
And I think there's a great example recently I've run into. There's this guy Doug who I guess I digitally met through Twitter, and now he listens to the podcast, and we're
awesome.
online friends.
Hey Doug, what's up, man?
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he lives around here.
Oh, cool.
I found out, which is crazy because we never met or anything. We met online. And he reached out to me at one point recently and was basically like, "Hey man, I love what you do, blah blah blah. Do you want would you be cool if I helped you produce your podcast? Can I help edit it for you?" And it became this major, I guess you could call it principled, ethical, whatever conundrum I'm in, because I've kind of said to myself over the past couple of years that I don't ever want to extract work from anyone unless I can pay them, and I can't pay him at this point.
Yeah.
And I've run into the same issue with certain designer friends of mine. I'm oh, I'd love to have this person do art for me, but I can't afford it, and then I wait till I can afford it, etc. It's because I again going back to this, I know how much people's time is worth, because I know how much my time is worth, and it's just one of these things. I feel from a principled perspective, I have to be able to reciprocate that, and it's this weird thing because I know that especially in the gig economy, there's this whole really shitty concept of I'm gonna do it for exposure. You know what I mean? Places,
that's a dangerous thing.
It is. Places are
right?
oh, you can intern here for free, but you're gonna get exposure. You're gonna get experience, and it's dude, I get to a certain degree, depending on a person or institution, there might be some merit to that, but on a broader level, it becomes so slippery and easily exploitative, and I hate the idea that for me personally, that I would be in a situation where I'd be expecting someone to produce content for me where I'm not paying them, because then, when it comes to art or any kind of work really, but specifically, let's just take art as an example.
Yeah.
If I have a friend, my coworker Jeff's done some design work for me in the past, and I've always tried to pay him, but he knows we're both poor artists, and it's this weird conversion that we do, or but we. As an example with him, it's it can easily become this thing. If I were to be hey Jeff, do this thing for free for me, and he's okay, cool, I don't got anything going on, I'll do it. It easily slides into the situation where he produces this art for me, and then I go, oh, it's not quite there. Can you tweak this? And you know what I mean? And then it just keeps going back and forth, and it's before long, he's filled with resentment. Because it's wait, I'm not getting paid. Why am I doing this? And it's neither one of us started from that place. We both started from oh, this is out of the goodness of our heart. We're friends. You give, I'll take, you give. But when you start with that mode of just expecting a certain level of free content from whoever, and then you
tough.
Expect to get your due diligence when you sell this product or whatever, it's not. It's just slippery. It's just a slippery thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
Which is why and that's man, we could talk about we could have a whole podcast talking about crowdfunding and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This is the thing that I'm very wary about. Deep down it'd be great to tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, instead of buying me a beer, why don't you fund this next record for me?
Mm-hmm.
Help me out. But I find it to be a very slippery thing, because I'm asking you to invest in me without knowing what the product is.
Yeah, right.
I don't know how this recording is going to go. I don't know what it's going to be like. But it's almost people today, and this is a weird thing for artists, right? You can get people to, Nathan, I'm telling you, man, you can get people to buy into your shit.
I know.
Before they ever hear it.
I know.
Right?
It's a weird time.
But once you make that shit, they won't buy it.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the process, then in a way, you often can feel beholden to them, because they've already invested. And then it's wait, do I have to please this person then?
Yeah, exactly. So I have this weird relationship with it, and I've never done it because I'm scared about what it means.
Yeah.
I probably spend way too much time thinking about it, which is my style. But I really have a lot of reservations and hang-ups about the whole crowdfunding thing.
Yeah.
It's a very Now, some people can do it great, and they do it really well, and they incentivize, and they give all kinds of packages and stuff. But I always have this weird thing. It's like, well, what if you're buying this before I make it? What happens if it turns out if it's shit, dude, and you don't like it? If it's terrible,
Yeah.
like there's a probability. There's a risk that you take. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, do I want to exploit that relationship? Because then will you ever support me again?
Exactly.
You know, or
Yes.
but when I put something out that I'm like wholeheartedly telling you this sounds great, it came off the way I was hoping it would come off, or damn near. Would you please buy it?
Yeah.
Support me now. And it's like all you hear is fucking crickets.
Yep, exactly, dude.
So it just cracks me up. The whole thing is really weird.
Can I tell you a horror story? About
I would love to hear a horror
crowdfunding?
story.
I've had, and I'll just preface this by saying, like, I've done 2 crowdfunding projects through
Yeah,
Kickstarter,
okay.
and they were both
I
successful.
don't mean to criticize.
No,
To each
listen,
their own.
no, please criticize them because I'm about to tell you a horror story about it. But I had good experiences, but I also ran into this issue.
Yeah.
One example, I've never told this on the podcast. I don't
Oh
think.
man, this is exclusive, ladies and gentlemen.
This is
Doug. Listen up.
Oh my God, I can't. I'm just gonna say it. This has been years. This happened in 2014, and it was the first one I did, I think. And the goal was like I think $7,500 or $6,500 for a full length album with my ex girlfriend that I was producing. And at the time. Like the content specifically around this album was like it had, I'll say like religious undertones to it. Like it wasn't like explicit, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But it was like the undertones were there.
Spiritual.
Yeah, spiritual. And I grew up in a very religious community, so a lot of the people that I'm still friends and family with, obviously, like to this day, like are pretty conservative Christian types, mostly like the Protestant denomination, and or Protestant umbrella, I should say, but needless to say, there's this guy who I knew from growing up, not terribly well, but like I knew him through friends from like going to like local shows at this one church, and he was always a very nice guy, and like he had a good relationship with a lot of friends of mine.
Yeah.
And needless to say, when I put this Kickstarter up, I was like getting the funding, up to the point where I needed it to be. And toward the end, he donated a mass sum of money.
Wow.
Like, and I didn't expect it. Like, I literally, from that time period of 2014, I mean, it would have been at least 6 years since I even saw this guy. Like, I was not like in touch with him. Like, once in a while, he might send me like a Facebook message, that type of thing. But like, we weren't like close. Just to put it into perspective.
Okay.
We just like knew each other from growing up, sort of. And he always seemed like a very good, generous guy.
So it was surprising that he would give you that.
It was very
huge
surprising,
amount, right?
and I knew he was older, and he was also single, and like I knew that he put a lot of his resources into like younger kids and like the church community and all that.
Right.
So that's pretty much the extent of what I knew. But anyway, so he donated this like really absurd sum of money that like just put us over the top basically, and it was super cool. And I was like, wow, like what the hell? So like message this guy, I'm like, wow, like thank you so much. We ended up talking a bit about it, and I don't want to whatever. I won't get too deep into it. But basically what happened is at that time, and this is 2014, since 2013, I'll say like around that area, like maybe a little earlier, but like that, let's say that year, like definitively, I had started posting a lot more political stuff on my Facebook and just like online in general, and just delving more into like ideology and like kind of like, going, like I'd always gone through different like channels of belief, but at this point I was really trying to like figure out who I was and like put it out there for the world, to mixed feedback, to some people being like, this is great, other people that I grew up with specifically like, hey, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Because I was kind of like shifting. There was a lot of undertones of like social justice. Like I know like Black Lives Matter, it started 2013. So they were kind of like the politics on Facebook and online were just getting really heated at the time.
Yeah, they still are. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Even more so
it
today.
started that like really crazy trajectory at the time period. So anyway, this guy, I don't remember specifically. I have it still, a screenshot somewhere, like what the status was. But I posted some status, and this is months after, like the project was funded and all that. It was done. Like we were in the studio. It was like it was going on, and I posted some status that this guy didn't like, and he DM'd me about it, and was basically like, "What are you talking about with this?" And like started like reprimanding me, and it eventually cascaded to the point where he was like, I'm going to take back my money. And I was like, dude, like it's already like been extracted from the account. Like it's over. Like the fundraising's over at this point. Like we're doing the album. And it became this like insane back and forth thing. Like I couldn't believe it. Like my mind was blown that like he would have the audacity to do this. And it was just like so heartbreaking, dude, because it was like, what is like who would like what? Like you disagree with me on like a Facebook status? It was about something religious or political that I guess was very visceral to him. And I, of course, since then, this is like what 5 years ago, I do my best to like maintain a level of sensitivity toward people's beliefs, but I'm also very opinionated, like as are most people. So like that balance can get gray. And like specifically with the status, I remember it wasn't anything abhorrent. You know what I mean? Like it was critical, but it wasn't like I'm saying something like anti-Semitic or like, you know what I mean? Like something that's like deemed like clear bigotry.
Yeah, society has said this is not cool. Right?
Yeah, right. So
but
like,
it wasn't like that.
It was just a very surprising turn of events, and then like that ended up like snowballing into like I showed it to a bunch of friends of mine, and like a couple other people on like that Facebook status particularly like saw this because he posted it. He posted like something he was messaging me about, but then he posted something like inadvertent about it essentially, and then someone else responded to him and was like, are you serious, dude? Then he ended up deleting the comment, and then that went away. But like he ended up DMing me, I forget if it was like a month later or whatever, being like sorry. He didn't end up taking the money back, but it was like this whole like ringer of just like emotional, like not trauma, but just like a roller coaster I was on, because I was like, man, like me and my girlfriend, like, you know, we were dating at the time. We had similar beliefs, but also some different beliefs. And like we were unified and like putting this like piece of art out there that we both believed in and stood behind. And to have this like, he was like our biggest funder by far, like come out and do that. It felt so manipulative and just freaky to what you're saying here about just like feeling like in any way, shape, or form beholden to the people who do this. And again, like that's my horror story. Like I've had, other than that, it's been largely successful. And I love the whole crowdfunding thing, specifically for art. Like I would get into maybe different opinions regarding like medical stuff, because I know like the medical stuff in a lot of ways is like propped up by like anti like Medicare for art for all type industries, and that's like a whole other thing. That's like it's cool to be able to have the communal option to fundraise, but like when people feel like they're forced to do like GoFundMe's for injuries that like could have been taken care of in a hospital, like it's messed up. Anyway, that's a tangent, but needless to say, like I totally am with you on the mixed bag of feeling like you're, you know, it's a scary thing. So you're putting yourself out there and you don't know. Like I had I knew this guy growing up sort of, but like I didn't have any expectation or like kernel of an idea that like something like that would happen. You know what I mean? So like to have that skepticism, I think, is healthy.
It's wild, man. I have, I mean, in terms of like anecdotal stuff. Yeah, I mean that's maybe what got me thinking about it, because I knew this guy, and I won't drop names or nothing, but there's this musician kind of friend that I got to know a little bit, and he did a crowdsourced GoFundMe, or was it whatever it was? I think it was probably Kickstarter.
Yeah,
at the time.
Kickstarter's like the artist one usually.
This is a while ago at this point, and probably like 2012 or something, and he wound up making like a ridiculous amount of money on the fundraiser. Like it was, I think someone told me it was like $15,000 or $20,000.
Wow.
And ultimately he bought a car and kind of absconded. Yeah, he like totally flaked.
What?
Yeah, so all people like put their money in, didn't get the stuff that he promised. Like he just disappeared. I mean, he was always kind of a flaky guy to begin with.
Yeah.
Like totally a flaky dude. But like he pretty much absconded with people's money and didn't record anything.
Wow.
And I don't know whatever happened, if like they refunded people, but I was like, how can this even happen? You know, like you promise somebody something and you don't do it, but it's a donation, so they have no say in how you really spend it in the long run. But there are some safe catches and guards there. That's the thing. I was like, wow, this is almost too much for me to even.
I don't know that situation. Just to interject there a second, but like it does get more. And don't take this in any way as excuse. That's horrible. But like I think to your point there of like the kind of like gray area of like the rules, it gets worse, I think, for creators as the as the expectations get blown out of proportion. Because like say his goal, this is all hypothetical, was like $2,000, and then all of a sudden he's got $15,000. So you have to like the system, if you're working ethically within it, like you're supposed to like raise your awards and raise like what you're given and like maybe your production or whatever it might be.
Right.
But like to your point, there's no rule set. There's no like he could have spent like. Even if he had done it ethically, he could have or not ethically, but less terribly. So he could have spent maybe like $5,000 on production when he was planning to spend $1,000, but then the rest of the $10,000 could have done whatever he wanted. You know what I mean? Like
but
there's no rules.
From what I gather, he never put anything out.
Yeah, that's
like
insane.
he literally bought a car and moved to the other side of the country.
Oh my God.
I'm not even kidding. Like it was a guy I knew from the East Coast. He went up on the West Coast. And
how did he not get sued? Like you think like Kickstarter would have this guy's
I don't know. Maybe he refunded everybody. I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, right.
But like I remember seeing that and I was like, this is crazy. And then it was like another local guy that I knew, and I love him. I think he's a great artist. I support him. Great dude. And I was like, I'd love to support his thing because I believe in his art.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote him a check. Sent it over to him. I don't know if he ever cashed a check or whatever for it, but like, I wanted his back catalog. He was like, that was one of the promises.
Oh,
one
cool.
of like so you get all his old records
in
digital format, and then you get the new one. But I don't know whatever happened, and it wasn't like a substantial. It was $30. Like it wasn't like a huge amount, but it was like the matter of it. Like that I wrote him this check, and like I said, I don't even know if he ever even cashed it. I wasn't even that good about following up about it. But like I never got the
principle.
I never got the records that I paid for, like the past ones, and I don't know if he ever made the record eventually because I never got the new one.
Wow!
So I just don't know whatever happened to it. And like
that's crazy.
It could have very well happened that he just never cashed that check. Maybe I should have done it electronically instead of giving them a check or something.
Yeah, right.
But I don't like to.
I understand.
I don't like electronic stuff on the internet.
A lot of people have apprehensions about that. Yeah.
So I prefer to write somebody a check and just like I know it's probably safer to use the internet than it is the check, but it's my old school world. Like I try to give him cash. He was like, "No, you got to give me a check or something so I can deposit it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he was like, oh, "I guess I'll write you a check then." Like instead of, But anyways, the point being was like, and I still see him around and everything, and we're friends. I'm not like holding any grudges, but like the concept of the funding thing was like. At that point, I was like, I don't think I could ever do it.
So slippery.
Personally. But then recently, I've been like thinking about all the projects that I'm doing. I'm doing so many projects, like so many different ones, like recording projects. And I'm like, it's getting hard to fund them all. And I'm like, maybe
you should do it, dude.
I should do one.
You should.
I'm also, and this is like the hard, okay, the even deeper, right? Let's go to the psychosis here or whatever it is. There's a fundamental fear that I have. That I'll ask for something
and you won't get it. No one's gonna give a shit. Yeah.
And then I'm like super like, oh, maybe I should say like a super low thing.
Oh man.
Like I'll ask for like $1,000 and maybe I'll get like a little bit and whatever.
Right.
And like I was like, because like I could use a little help with some of these records that I'm putting out, but like I have this fear that like no one will help me.
Yeah.
Because like and it's this weird thing, Nathan. Man, I mean. You are the they who are listening to this podcast now. And I'm not calling you
fellow
out.
Listener.
But what I'm saying too is like people want to be a part of the process sometimes more than they want to be like the receiver of the thing. Which is like an interesting concept. Like we've and in that regard, man, I think we've bashed on modern culture a lot tonight, unfortunately.
Cultural critics, you said it yourself, right. You love them.
But in some regards, there's some really cool things happening in terms of people experiencing stuff. People want to experience stuff today more than they ever did in the past, or maybe back to a time before. Like people want to go places, they want to do things with their money. They don't want to. Buy things. They want to do things. They want to spend their money in different ways. They want to be a part of that experience of creating something than actually buying the creation. Mm-hmm. Like it becomes less of like owning the record and more of supporting the record. And I kind of like understand that. I get that. And these are all like big philosophical questions that I have as I'm like thinking about whether or not I'd ever do it, like a GoFundMe or whatever, a Kickstarter. And these are big things. And the weird thing is, right, another fly in the ointment, right? Now we have people out there who are like consultants. Mm. They're literally Kickstarter consultants.
Yeah, right.
I've seen people like offer their services.
I feel like I could do it.
I think you might be good at that job, man.
That's hilarious.
But like they're like offering that service, and to me it's like, wait, I'm gonna pay you to help me fundraise?
Yeah.
And I guess that's like a model that works in the real world. That really happens.
But it's so crazy to think about.
But it's like weird. Like these people are donating to my cause that I'm going to pay you, but I need to respect your time. But shouldn't it be about donation? I don't know. It's a weird thing, man.
I understand. Yeah.
But it's like, and then how much percentage of each person's dollar gets donated? Gets paid to you to help me coerce them. I use that word. I shouldn't use that word, but convince them to support me. So it's like this weird, like nefarious. I don't want to call it nefarious, man. It's like it's a super little gray area.
It's advertising, and all advertising has a grain of just like you're selling. You're selling not I shouldn't say it's never a lie, but like you're selling. There's always a lie attached to it. You know what I mean? Because it's like
appearance.
Like when you sell a brand image on anything, it's not necessarily like it could be literally like a nonprofit that just does work with kids in Africa or something. Like it could be something completely altruistic, but I mean there's still the element that you have to sell. Like this nonprofit is better than the other nonprofits. Right. You know what I mean? Like you have to present it in a way that's gonna like get eyeballs, get attention, get donations. Like no matter what you do, for us, it's like we have to, whether we believe it or consciously understand it or not, like we have to, when we post about our music, do it in a way that it's like, you should listen to this because I'm great. Yeah. Even if like, and in that there's truth, but there's also a grain of lie that we're like trying to sell something. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's where it gets sticky.
I totally do. But it's like a weird thing. It's like, if it was my money, right? Mm-hmm. Like I was producing the record and like, paying for the record entirely, and it wasn't anybody else's money, I would easily spend that money and say, yes, help me promote this record.
But because it's other people's money. Yes, yeah.
But maybe they want me to use that money to get more people to invite. It's just a weird thing. It gets to be a very weird, philosophically slippery thing. Yeah. But I think we solve all the world's problems tonight.
I think it's great, man. I think you should do it. Knowing you, I think it is a daunting thing. I remember the 2 times I've done it, I was both, I was both surprised and also disappointed in the support and the lack of support. Oh. You get both ends of the coin, because I think you're forced to reckon with the fact that less people. It's not that they don't care, but like it's actually, see, let me frame it a different way. It's not that people don't care. It's that people are so stretched. They're stretched so thin in so many different directions that it's really hard for most people to find to summon the energy to donate. Like it might sound like such a trivial thing to me or you, because it's like, oh, this is art. It's our art. It's my life. Like, why wouldn't you do that? But so many people that I know in my life could have afforded to donate to my project, my Kickstarters, both of them at different times, and not only could they have, but like are always like very adamant about, I love what you do, I support what you do, etc. Then they didn't show up to that, and I knew they saw it. Like I texted it to them, I emailed it to them, they posted on Facebook, etc. Like so, I knew that it was like in their face for 30 days or whatever it would have been, and they just didn't show up. So it's like you get that part of it where it's like, okay, like that kind of sucks. Like I have to reckon with that. But then you also get very surprised at the people who do support. Like I don't know, the biggest thing for me for both ones was so many of the people that supported were people who I wouldn't consider not affluent, but like they were lower class. Like there were people that were in my financial situation who at the time specifically who like were making between minimum wage and maybe $30,000 a year. You know what I mean? Okay, yeah. Not people that were making like 40, 50, 60, 100K.
Lower middle class.
Yeah, lower middle class people. So like you get very surprised at like who turns out. And so much of it's just like a failed anecdotal sociological experiment, because it's like obviously there's so many factors you'll never know going into it. Like maybe the person you thought did see it didn't see it, or maybe they literally just forgot last minute, didn't do it. So there's all these like stupid factors, but like I think overall it's really worth. It's worth it for someone in your shoes who's trying to like create something really cool, and you're at a phase where like you need the help. Yeah. And, like both times I did it, like I funded this last record I did on my own, but the 2 times prior I really did need it. Like I couldn't, even if I wanted to, I couldn't have done it the way that I had laid it out. So I think if you're in that situation where like you could use the money, and it's a way, like you said, to tell a story and to lasso your fan base together in a fun, like experiential way. Yeah. Like it is more. It's more than just like, hey, I'm fundraising, give me money. Like to those people, it is an experience. They do feel like they're part of it.
Yeah, part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild, man.
It's good to be skeptical, but I do think for what it's worth, man, it's it's a good risk to take.
You've given me food for thought. I mean, that's a good conversation,
Something
right?
to think about.
I mean, that's what should happen in a good conversation,
Yeah,
right? You should think about new things and perhaps rethink your position on certain things.
We'd all be better off doing that once in a while, huh?
I think so.
Well, this has been great, man. We've been going on for a while. I know you got a long drive home.
Nah,
It'd be a
not
late
too bad,
night.
man. Not too bad.
Is there any like specific place you want to send people, like your website or Spotify or wherever?
Oh, Spotify's great. I mean, Spotify is not great. I mean, I love don't Spotify. Please come and sponsor Nathan's podcast.
Oh, God.
You Spotify folks. But at the same time, maybe you could pay us a little better for the streams.
Your like quarterly email. It's like you earned 0.1 cent or whatever on this stream.
It's horrible, man. Like, oh man, but I love the concept.
Yeah,
because
great.
there's the exposure, right? That you're gonna get so much exposure.
Bro.
So I don't know. Yeah, Spotify's cool, man. Facebook, Instagram. I try to post on Instagram whenever I can, and the website's the best though. JasonAger.com.
Beautiful. Thanks for coming on the podcast,
Hey, man. Thank you for having me.